I think you're nuts! I think you're nuts!
You think I'm nuts? Hello everyone, I'm the Night Sky Prince, and today I'm joined by a guest that I've wanted to collaborate with for quite some time. A lot of you guys have wanted to see me collaborate with him, and so thank you guys so much for, helping make this happen. I'm so excited. I've been watching this guy's videos since before I ever even made videos myself. We were just chatting about that right before the stream. And so I am really excited to sit down with Frustrated Jacob. Can you tell us, my guy, a little bit about yourself, what you do, and your community and such?
Well, sure. Early days stuff, which is stuff that you were talking about, you watched back before you were doing content, was really early on, like literally a week or two after E3 2013, when Final Fantasy 15 was re-unveiled. I did a video about Final Fantasy 15. It was both kind of a survey of the news that we'd received and also kind of a catch up on all the Versus stuff. And I bring this up because it's a little bit relevant to what we're going to be talking about today on your show. But it was interesting because the main reason I did it was that I saw so much confusion at the time, because when 15 kind of showed up again, they were just kind of like, yeah, okay, you remember all that stuff from 5 years ago, right? And it's like, I did, but most people didn't, right? Most people hadn't been following FF Versus 13 that closely, and if they had, it had been like 2-3 years since we'd seen it at that point. So kind of had faded out. It kind of fizzled out of people's memories. So it was an opportunity for me to both do kind of like coverage of the game and talk about what we knew about it, like from before, and kind of connect the two. And for a little while, I did, amongst other things, I did coverage of 15 news as it came along, because originally it was very piecemeal, just bits and pieces here and there. It took a while. Once we got around to once episode to Sky came out, I was kind of done, because I know this don't take this the wrong way, because your channel is very much like I'm gonna hit every piece of news that comes out within this world, right? Me personally, I don't find that interesting to create myself. Like I didn't want to do that, which is why I tried to do like one video with all the meaty information when there was news. But once we got to the point where it was like, they were doing what do they call them? The active time reports. Their variations on the FF14 live letters. Once they started doing those like live streams periodically, and we got 2 demos, I was like, I'm not talking about this anymore. There's no point, because at that point there was so much information and so much coverage that I just really didn't have any interest in covering it any further. But yeah, no, since then, I don't know. It's kind of difficult to talk about what I do on YouTube, because it's a real grab bag of just kind of whatever I'm interested in. And lately, just because I've been busy with other stuff, my main channel's been pretty slow in terms of new content. Frustrated Jacob, my main channel. I do have a secondary channel called Research Runs, which is our Let's Play channel. Call it that. It's kind of a joke on like speed runs, because we go very, very slow and meticulous. Yeah. Did a full playthrough of the entire Kingdom Hearts series as it is available on like the PlayStation consoles. Like we didn't, for example, we did not do a playthrough of Days. I didn't, stop and emulate the whole thing, because we were pushing up against, I wanted to be able to play 3 like right when it came out, which we did accomplish. But like my friend Joey and I, he's the main guy who hosts it with me. I have a couple other people that do YouTube with. My friend Joey and I, we did a playthrough of the Kingdom Hearts games 1 to 3. He'd never played any of them. I was intimately familiar with them. We were finishing our Birth by Sleep playthrough like December of 2018. And we literally finished 0.2 like 3 days after Kingdom Hearts 3 launched. And so there was like, I was like, even if I really wanted to do a playthrough of Days, it was like a time crunch that didn't happen. Right. But yeah, then nowadays we're kind of done with Kingdom Hearts, play a lot of other stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Do cool stuff, but it's a real grab bag all over the place kind of style of content with me. But I think you kind of, I think the pains of the difficulty sometimes of trying to break out into other things when you have that niche. Because I know you've talked about wanting to do kind of spreading out your coverage to other things, and that can be really difficult on the YouTube scene. I guess just a while ago I decided that I didn't care that much, and I was like, just like whatever.
Yeah, no, that's the right attitude to have, because it can be pretty difficult, and I've been very thankful that in all the attempts I've had to try to branch out into different things, people have been very supported. And I've had a lot of success in branching out to different things. A lot of you have showed up for like my Elden Ring streams, and I've made videos on even other Square Enix stuff like Nier, Dragon Quest, or Persona. Well, not Persona because that's Atlas, but other JRPGs, I should say. And that's all gone really well. And so mostly, nowadays me only sticking to Final Fantasy stuff, not that I'm trying to, just has to do with my own comfort zone more than more than it has to do with you guys.
And also,
sure.
right now is a very exciting time to be a Final Fantasy fan. There's a lot going on.
There's so much going on.
Since you commented on that, my community has generally been pretty supportive of me branching out into other stuff too. I didn't mean that as any kind of sideways.
Oh no.
It's mainly that I have a tendency to disappear from YouTube for like 2 years. That's the main thing. My viewership over time. But I know we're here to talk primarily about KH4 and Versus 13. You and I've been talking about doing this for a while. We discussed maybe we'll talk about 7 Remake. Maybe we'll talk about 16 if that shows up again. I reached out to you last week and I was like, I think I'm ready to come on. Let's do it. Maybe something will happen at this Kingdom Hearts 20th anniversary event. I think they'll announce merchandise in a new mobile phone game. But wait, maybe there'll be something to talk about. And now we're here and I'm like, oh, what a mistake that was. Why did I? But before we break into any of that, I think we're, like I said, we're going to be going for a while. We'll see if we get into more FF stuff afterwards. We're going to be mostly KH4 and Versus, at least up front. So with that in mind, I guess, just to be safe, today, I guess anyone expect full season, open season spoilers on all of Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy Versus 13 and Final Fantasy 15. And maybe we may talk about 7 Remake later on. Yeah. So if you guys are worried about spoilers for any of that, just, be advised that's what you're in for today. But before we get into any of that, I have to say something else to you.
Okay, what's up, man?
Just the other night, you did a stream and you have a theory, you have a Final Fantasy 16 theory.
Yes.
Which your theory is that Clive, the character of 16, is secretly the dominant of Ifrit, the big evil summon that shows up in the trailer, and that that the twist of the game is going to be that he blacks out and summons Ifrit, and he spends the whole game looking for who did this.
Yes.
He's going to find out eventually that it was him. It was him all along. He was his own worst enemy. I think you're nuts.
You think I'm nuts? Please explain. Go on. I'm curious.
This is the opening. This is my opening gambit. Showing my appreciation for you inviting me on your channel. But no. See, here's what I'm thinking. Right, number one thing that pops into my brain is I imagine that concept that you're describing. Right, I'm imagining somebody from Creative Business Unit 3 sitting in the cafeteria at Square Enix talking about this with somebody across the table, and they go, that's what we're doing with Stranger of Paradise. And I imagine that conversation would have happened at some point. And they would have gone, if they'd ever been planning that. But I think I know what's going on in 16. And I want you to hear
please
me.
Please share. No, I gotta hear this.
So I'm also coming at this from the perspective of, I forget the name of the writer, but one of the it's the guy who wrote we think it anyway, that it's the guy that wrote A Realm Reborn and Heaven's Sword. I
want to say his name is God, I can't. It starts with an M. I could Google it right now.
The theory crafting is this guy was the lead writer on 14, and he left around the time of Heaven's Sword, or around the time of Stormblood, or
Kazutoyo Meihiro.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are saying that they think this guy's the lead writer.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put too much credit into the style of Business Unit 3 or the style of Yoshi P or whatever, but let's assume that it's, somewhat similar. I feel like we can guess that just because in the trailer, there's a whole scene of people sitting in a boardroom talking about you sworn your allegiance to so-and-so and you're working for so-and-so and whoever. And was it not the whoever who drove back the whatever at the hordes of, I forget all the proper nouns they throw out in that scene.
Yeah.
But that feels very much like how 14 will spend 10 minutes on the Eorzean Alliance leadership sitting in a room discussing a refugee crisis that is a subplot. You know what I mean?
Right.
So here's what I'm thinking. If you look at the information that we've been given so far about 16, obviously the information they give you early on with something like this, it may not be the most important stuff. It may just be what they feel comfortable sharing. But we can usually guess if they're putting it forward, it's somewhat important. And the official website for 16 lists 6 different countries. right? It's like 6 different countries, and that's a lot. That's a large number of countries to be important to one story. To be fair, the Duchy of Rosaria or whatever, which I think is where the main character's from, I'm laboring under the assumption that it will be reduced to ash within the first 5 hours of the game.
Yeah, right.
Part of the story.
Right.
But you have I mean, I'm thinking about, like, 12, FF12, which is probably the most, like, politically complicated of all the mainline FFs other than 14. Like, that has the Arcadian Empire and Dalmasca. And, like, Rosaria is not, like, they're part of the story, but you only ever meet one character from Rosaria. And Nabradia's is literally nuked off the face of the planet in the first 5 minutes of the game. So it's like there's a large number of countries for us to be concerned with. So I'm willing to bet that we've got something very similar to the amount of detail that that we see in something like A Realm Reborn, where they're concerned about, like, Ul'dah and the other two whose names I can never remember.
Limsa and Gridania.
Thank you, Limsa, Limsa, and Gridania. There's a lot of time spent on these pretty much, like, amicable nations having issues and disagreements that they have to debate their way through, right? So clearly these types of political setups. I'm also thinking about what Tim Rogers had to say when he was on your show before about how all these people apparently love Game of Thrones and The Witcher.
Yeah, yeah, they do. They do, yeah.
So here's my thinking, right? One of the nations that's listed on the 6 countries is called, like, the Iron Kingdom or something. And it specifically says, like, they are a remote island chain off the coast. They don't speak the language of the continent. They're extremely isolationist. They don't interact with anybody else, right? And one of the and it's noted for all the other countries, right? It's like the dominant of Shiva or the dominant of Titan makes their home in this country, right? Each country seems to have a crystal, so we can assume, like, one person within the population of that country, like, is always designated as the dominant of that country.
Right.
Summon, right?
And I like how even like the different cultures actually view the summons very differently.
Yeah.
Some are very pro summon and some are, like, very anti summon.
Right. Some of them talk, like, it's like in our main characters, Joshua is, like, he's part of the royal family and he's the person who inherits the Phoenix, right? There's other countries where it's like they're strictly used as part of the military, stuff like that. But the Iron Kingdoms, or whatever it's called, the remote island chain, is very interesting because it says that dominants are considered heretical, and if they are discovered within that nation's borders, they are put to death. Right. Right. So they don't have a summon running around, and they presumably haven't for decades and decades and decades, for a very long time. Right. So here's what I think. I think that when that character in the trailer is like another icon of fire, that's impossible. It's because Ifrit is the one from the Iron Kingdom, and it hasn't been seen for generations. Oh. And someone from one of the other countries involved, because, like, saying they don't speak the language, their isolation, is like, how are they even going to get involved in the story then? Someone from one of the other countries sent an agent into the Iron Kingdom, and their objective was to find and extract the dominant before they could be executed. Oh. And because, like, here's the thing, right? Let's say you and me are leaders of states in Final Fantasy XVI. You're the prince of the Kingdom in the Night Sky, and I'm the chief jester of the Duchy of Frustration, okay? And your country as the dominant, you have Titan and I've got Shiva, right? And you're standing out, and you and I have, like, we're kind of tenuous relationships. We're not really at war right now, but we're kind of in a place where maybe we could be in the future, right? You're standing out on your balcony overlooking your kingdom, and suddenly Shiva just spawns in the middle of your city and starts killing civilians, right? Right. You know that was me. Yeah. Right. Now, what if some big kaiju that no one has ever seen before shows up in the middle of your city and starts wrecking stuff? Right. Was it me? Right. So I think what kind of, like, leads me off on the idea that Clive is actually Ifrit's dominant is that they, at least on the website, they describe Ifrit as the dark icon. Dark icon. Right? And so I guess for me, trope-wise, it makes sense to contrast that with Brothers. And then with the logo being Phoenix and Ifrit, it really drives it home to me that being symbolism of the two brothers in their struggle for the logo would make particular sense, unless they had a way to connect Ifrit to Joshua in a specific way that would, like, justify the design of the logo. We'll see what happens, but see, my thought process, just knowing about, like, I think about how, like, the entire plot line of Stormblood is just we want to take a military action in this one place, so let's go start something in another location. Like it's very like it's the type of granular storytelling you don't normally see in this genre. And my whole thought process is like, within everything that we know about the setting of 16, right? Politically, it seems kind of tenuous. Like there's kind of an alliance on one of these main land masses, and then the other land mass is some kind of a bunch of other people. But then we see the time skip, and there's some kind of big war going on when Clive is older, right? I figure someone somewhere wants to start something, but they don't want to be complicit in it. Because like in the trailer, it says like the Imperials are attacking, like the Dragoon who shows up, they call him an Imperial, right?
Right.
I'm willing to bet that Ifrit is not under the control of the Imperials, but somebody else got wind that the Imperials are going to launch some kind of small incursion somewhere or another, and they sent Ifrit to go and spawn in the middle of that in order to kick off a war. So like one of the other 4 nations, maybe like the Switzerland nation that's on that little land bridge in the middle that's supposed to be neutral. I think the big mystery of the game is going to be how did the Empire get another icon? The Empire's going to vehemently deny that this was us, and the big mystery is going to be who is actually someone somewhere. One of these nations has an anonymous, untraceable nuke, and they're using it to completely rebalance power within this world. I think that's going to be the plot.
Right.
And you know, even if it just breaks down to the final boss is, you know, whoever this rogue element is using Ifrit, and the only way to fight an icon that big is to use another icon. And by this point, we found Joshua, who was presumed dead or captured. You know, blah blah blah. That's right. But you know, we'll see what happens.
That's big brain. I think that's big brain. That's probably better. We'll see what happens. Definitely better, I think, than when I was offering on that topic. And with the Iron Kingdom and the way they have the way they view icons really reminds me of the way Garlemald views summoning in Final Fantasy XIV, where they basically they outlawed religion because they didn't want anyone to summon, right? And the only religion that you're able to have is worship of the Emperor, and that's it. And so I think that actually kind of reminds me of Garlemald, and considering that it reminds me of Garlemald, if you know how Garlemald goes in 14, it would make sense for them to kind of be the instigators in this conflict. So yeah, I think that's a really solid theory for how that.
I think the big mystery of the game is going to be where did Ifrit come from, and then we're going to figure that out, and then it's going to be who actually has.
Right.
But I have nothing else to say about 16 for right now. I apologize for derailing that conversation. Maybe we'll be back when the media blowout happens a week from now or 5 months from now.
Yeah.
We can talk about Kingdom Hearts 4 and Versus 13. I know that's what people showed up for.
Oh, you know it's going to happen, right? Like. Like the day that I upload this is when the 16 trailer is going to happen, and they're going to watch it, and one of us is going to be horrible. One of us is going to be dead on, or both of us might be dead wrong. I don't know, but in either case, like whenever I upload it, I'm sure, and then people will be like in the comments, like, "Oh my God, you were so wrong." I will. Yeah, I don't either. I don't either. And in fact, I kind of prefer it because then I'd rather be surprised in some way. And subverted. So yes, Kingdom Hearts 4 and Final Fantasy Versus 13. So tell me, what was your first initial reaction when you saw Virum Rex in Kingdom Hearts 3?
My initial reaction?
Yeah, like you're in the Toy Story world, or you're opening it, because it's like the first thing you see when you get there.
I don't remember, because I don't think I experienced it linearly. I seem to recall, because like I'm pretty sure I saw it like the day or the day after the game came out, and I didn't actually play it physically for a couple of days after, because I'd been busy with other stuff. So I think I saw it non-linearly and was told this is a commercial that plays on Toy Story World. I don't know what my initial reaction was. I think that, I mean, I definitely detected some salt, obviously. There was a lot of bitterness there. But I mean, I could have already told you that, like there was that interview after Nomura got kicked off of 15, where they were like, "So how do you feel about what's going on with 15?" He's like, "I don't want to talk about it." And then someone else was like, "So you don't want to talk about it?" He's like, I am pouring all of my anger into writing Kingdom Hearts 3. And it's like, do you remember that interview or not?
I think I do. That was like way back though. That was like 2015-ish.
That was 2014 when he got taken off of the project and it was sold Tabata directorship. I mean, I think that's like the most canned that I've ever heard a non-Naoki Yoshida or Yoko Taro high-level person in Square and it was him being evasive and saying, I don't want to talk about that, but just that one comment, pouring all of my anger into writing Kingdom Hearts 3 was pretty wild. But no, it's I don't know. My reaction when I saw it was, sure, yeah. I didn't have a super duper strong reaction to it because I thought it was funny. I thought it was really funny, and I also thought this is not a one-off gag. This is going to come back in some way. This is not just a haha, get it cute thing. I knew that was a real dude, and we were going to go to Tokyo at some point, or I knew it in my bones. That was what, I guess I'll say that was my reaction to it, was knowing it was not just a gag. I knew that it was a thing. But I feel like this is kind of a broader point, I guess. Because I think there's a lot of talk about this, oh man, finally, this is, we're going to get Versus 13, right? Finally, we're going to get to see Versus 13. No.
Yeah.
Number one, Versus 13. I think we have a lot of people who are only vaguely familiar with Versus 13, or Kingdom Hearts fans who kind of have the understanding this was a thing Nomura was working on once. Versus 13 was supposed to be an M-rated game where the main character was breaking people's necks and using their bodies as human shields to avoid gunfire. Like, this is not going to translate, and that was right. I'm pretty sure that would have been a critical part of the tone.
Right.
That's going to carry over to the world of Kingdom Hearts or to a standalone video game titled Verum Rex, which we'll talk about in a minute. But what I do think is that we need to all, just in general, when looking at artists, sometimes it's important to take a step back and go, time passes and people's opinions on things change and people move on and stuff moves around. But then there will also just be things that people like, things that are their tastes, things that they enjoy doing. Like, I promise this may seem a little meandering, but I promise I'm going somewhere with it. There's a lot. I'll see Kingdom Hearts fans talking about, like, what is the symbolism of this? What's going on with this? What do you think Nomura means by this, right? Like, I think it's been generally accepted by the Kingdom Hearts fan base that 7 and 13 are just, he thinks they're cool. It's just a motif, right? He likes using the numbers 7 and 13. Like, there's no deeper meaning. It's just fun. It's just like a fun thing that he does. It's this little mimetic thing of he peppers the numbers in there. In the KH4 trailer, it's like, you've been asleep for 7 days. Why didn't Strelitzia say a week? Because the number 7, right? There's nothing, like, there's no deep meaning to that. He just likes the number 7. It's a fun little reoccurring thing for him. But then I see people going like, oh man, like Kingdom Hearts 1 opens with like that. Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 both open with like a dream sequence and a character waking up. Sora's waking up on the sofa in Kingdom Hearts 4. Why is he always waking up? What's the symbolism of waking up? It's like, I think Nomura just likes characters waking up to begin a story. All of the Versus 13 trailers that don't start with high octane action start with not Roxas,
Noctis.
Noctis waking up. It's just, you just get people who like certain kinds of imagery, people who just like certain visuals, they like certain styles, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything super deep or heady. And then I bring this around to discussions that he had back when 15 was announced, that he had a couple days ago, talking about 4, which I have some notes written down here somewhere. Hold on. Nomura said in a 15 interview that he doesn't relate to high fantasy settings and likes to start realistic and move into more fantastic elements. He likes like a realistic setting that fantasy then intrudes upon, right? And then this was like a bullet point summary because Audrey Atsukai Mochi on Twitter, I think
Aitai Mochi. Yeah.
She was doing like little translations or bullet points of interviews and stuff that came out, and I look at her stuff every now and then. So she had a bullet point from an interview at the 20th anniversary event. He's not a fan of too much fantasy and prefers to mix between fantasy and reality, where reality is only slightly off, right? And I think he just likes how Tokyo looks. I think it's very easy for us to look at, oh, he's doing a fantasy game set in Tokyo with an anime character and go, that's Versus 13. I think that he just thinks Tokyo looks cool. I think he wants to make a game set in Tokyo. I think in his mind, he's got an idea for a kind of low fantasy in the modern day setting. I think he just likes the aesthetic of that. I mean, there's even, with regards to him liking a realistic setting that magic intrudes upon, you can even see this in Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2. Kingdom Hearts 1, you start out on an island. It deliberately says magic is a mystery to you when it explains what the stat is, which is a weird way of saying it. Instead of just saying, don't worry about MP right now, or not having it on the screen, it says magic is still a mystery to you. And then you spend all this time on an island, doing on a scavenger hunt, picking up seagull eggs. And then Kingdom Hearts 2, the same thing. You're living in a normal town where nothing interesting ever happens, and then something intrudes upon it. Which this gives me a bit of concern for the fact that he's still the main guy on this series, on Kingdom Hearts, a series about Donald Duck and Goofy. But maybe we'll talk about that another day. But I think that the reaction of, oh my God, he's putting Versus 13 into Kingdom Hearts. I think he's at least vaguely aware before he does it that reaction is going to happen, because I think he knows that it's a good marketing tactic to make people think, hey, look, you're going to get Versus 13 if you buy Kingdom Hearts 4. But it's not. It's a story that's going to be set in Tokyo, and it's going to have maybe some reoccurring themes from the other thing. But I don't know. I feel like the links are going to be thematic and aesthetic, not like this is some kind of remake. You know what I mean?
Right.
If that makes any sense.
No, I think that makes perfect sense. So to kind of answer the question myself, when I first saw Verum Rex in Kingdom Hearts 3, my first initial reaction was, I was like, man, this is a really cool Versus 13 reference, right? And I put out quite a few videos breaking down all the information in there, and it was just, it was completely littered with things from Versus 13, even down to the fact that Yozora like wears like red bottom shoes just like Noctis does, and the references in his weapons and the designs of his clothes, and the fact that his silhouette is literally Noctis, and the fact that even, I mean, going forward to Kingdom Hearts 4 now, Sora also kind of looks like Noctis, Riku looks like Noctis, and then Yozora is quite literally Noctis.
I can't wait for Kyrie to look like Noctis. Because honestly, I mean, I'll like her. I'll probably like. I didn't care for her. To be honest, I didn't care for her KH3 design that much. So I'm waiting for the Noctification of Kyrie.
Oh, she's gonna be stellified.
Oh, you know what? I'd take stellified Kyrie.
Because we have 3 Stellas now.
Oh, you're right. You know, I'll take a stellified Kyrie. I'll absolutely take that. I'm down for that.
Right, because we got Strelitzia. We have the brown-haired Stella. And then we actually have like actual Stella.
The nameless star.
And the nameless star. So we actually have 4 Stellas.
Oh, what brown-haired were you thinking about?
Yozora's Stella.
Yeah, that's the nameless star. That's
right.
That's the only title we have for her right now.
Right. And then even the mention of her being like, she says something to the effect of where her love's been changed beyond recognition or something like that. And I'm like, wow. That sounds vaguely familiar to a certain situation.
I don't think they're gonna do it.
Right.
But like, so like, you know, people talk about, you know, are we gonna find out? Because there's that whole bit about like, you don't look like Sora and I don't look like me. You recognize me as Yozora, but I don't look like myself at the ending of Remind, right? I think people are going nuts thinking like, oh my God, is this gonna end and like the veil's gonna fall and he's just gonna be Noctis in the Versus 13 outfit? This is another reason why I don't think that's going to happen, and I don't think that we're going to get a Versus 13 remake, is for the exact same reason, which is something that I think people kind of... I think fans get they look at these things from kind of the wrong angle sometimes, and they forget that all of these products are assets. The character Noctis is an intellectual property asset, right? Right. And, you know, he's you know, and I don't just mean that in the sense like he's appeared in Tekken. I mean that this is a part of their brand, right? And to go out and say, okay, we're going to spend a couple $1 million making an alternate universe version of Noctis, that doesn't happen. You know, that only happens in the world of comic books, where you're not spending multi-million dollars to do another run of Spider-Man, or in the world of Spider-Man films, where you've got like 5 different companies fighting over control of Spider-Man, where you know, Sony is like, yeah, we'll spend another couple $1 million to do an animated movie with new Spider-Man, because what else are we gonna do? We'll spend a couple $1 million to set up a Sinister Six movie where they're gonna fight, I don't know, not Spider-Man. They're gonna fight in that Sinister Six movie. They're gonna fight evil versions of themselves. Wait, I thought they were already evil, but no, they're good guys because they have to be the protagonists. They'll fight. It'll be like same thing. I think they just did this in Morbius. I'm pretty sure in Morbius he fights like a non-canon, he just fights another like vampire character with the same powers who's not from the comics. Like when they get around to making that Sinister Six movie, they're gonna fight 6 villains who are original concoctions who are not from anything, and they're just gonna be the lamest version of a comic book movie where it's like, oh, the hero fights like a mean version of themselves.
Yeah.
That's going to be what that is. But no, sorry, I got off on a tangent there. Freaking, we're not going to see alternate version Noctis. We're not going to see a remake of Versus 13 ever because there's too much of an investment in the Noctis, in the Noctis that we have right now. And too much of an investment in Final Fantasy 15 as we received it.
Right.
I mean, I imagine like if they decided after 13 happened, right? Like, okay, people didn't like that very much. Let's make another 13 game that like has lightning in it, but it's completely different. It's like they were never going to do that.
Right.
It's never going to happen.
And she acts completely different and talks completely different, and her backstory is different, and right. She's completely rebranded.
I do wonder how much the characterization of Noctis changed, because I've noticed something that is.
He's changed a lot. Don't you remember that like famous quote from like Versus 13 that he put out, where he said something like, "Fools set the rules in this world, isn't it obvious?" Well, it was very angsty, right?
I feel like that's so much in the realm of like a plot that doesn't exist anymore,
right?
But
I can't even imagine. I can't imagine the current Noctis saying that under pretty much any circumstances, because it seems out of character for him to say that under most circumstances, because he's just not that kind of guy.
The thing that was odd, though, is that I remember, Tetsuya Nomura is the character designer and director / story director, right? And the dude, I remember him giving interviews where he was like, yes, Noctis's personality may be very different from what you expect based on his appearance, right? And I'm like, I mean, it's some kind of creative genius to deliberately design a character to not evoke the character's personality, and then in an interview say, you may find the character's personality is completely different from what you expect based on what I drew. So like, he was always talking about, like, he always said, like, I think he said stuff in interviews where he's like, the character's a bit more sensitive than you might expect. I forget what he said specifically, but he said a bunch of stuff about how the character of Noctis may not be what you expect from the trailers and the art design. And I'm like, you're the one making the trailers and the art design. But I think that's just him. I think he just likes those kinds of contrasts. I think he likes being a little cheeky, subverting expectations. But that makes me go, like, I think that we never saw whatever original Noctis was. I don't think we ever saw it. So then in the same vein, I don't know how different it was from what we got, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I think the commentary, at least from the Nameless Star and everything that we know, especially about Yozora and the way they framed his character, it very much seems to be a commentary about how the presentation of Noctis's character was changed.
But that's my thing, right? That's my thing. That's my thinking is that's not content yet. Like that's teaser, right?
Right.
So it's very easy to go without committing to anything, and to be so this is bigger picture. So anyone who's not familiar with me, I'm a big fan of Kingdom Hearts. I really like the Kingdom Hearts series. I sincerely do. This is something that maybe some people have a misconception about me, that I don't like it because I've been critical of some of the games in the series, but I really do like the series. The only ones that I would say, like, my ratio on like to dislike tilts in the dislike direction are pretty much just Dream Drop Distance and, depending on the day, Kingdom Hearts 3. There's a lot of stuff in Kingdom Hearts 3 that I really like, but like, unless I stop and think about it and go, okay, remember that good part, my brain always drifts to kind of the negative stuff, which kind of is the reverse thing with Birth by Sleep, where like when I'm sitting around talking about Birth by Sleep, I'm like, that game's pretty good. And then I sit down and play it, and there's bits of it that I'm like, ooh, all right, the characters talk like this, and they never interact with each other, right? I forgot. But anyway, one of the things that I was saying before KH3 even came out, ever since DDD, is that there's an issue, and this isn't a Nomura issue, this is a writing issue in general, is that when you step out and you say, this is what I'm going to do next time, that's not content, right? When events aren't happening that don't change the status quo of a story, then a story isn't being told. And this is something that happens a lot just with franchises that go on for too long and just wind up on life support, where they can become really devoid of substance and like actual events and things happening. And my biggest problem with DDD, Dream Drop Distance, was that the entire game, and this is part of why understanding Versus 13 I think is crucial, not to just understanding Kingdom Hearts 4, but to understanding the whole Kingdom Hearts series from 2 onward, is that if you look at the timeline on Versus 13's production, I know you're going to ask me a question in a few minutes about, we're going to talk about the history of Versus 13's development, but I guess we're kind of segueing into that now. It's like Versus 13, he and the KH2 team went off to work on that like right after KH2, right? And Osaka team was working on BBS, Days was outsourced, Coded was mostly outsourced. And we have a time period where he's off working on this new project, but it's marred by Crystal Tools, by the PlayStation 3 development engine, which is being developed. The engine is being developed alongside the games they're supposed to support it, which include the original version of 14, 13, and Versus 13. And somewhere in the middle of the production, we know this from both post-mortem on 13 and from looking at like staff listings, people started getting poached off of the development of Versus onto fixing Crystal Tools, like kind of production of, because they couldn't shelve 14 for too long because there's too much financial investment in 14, and 13 needed to come out first, obviously. So production on Versus 13, from what we know, I did a video a long time ago called Final Fantasy 15 and the Marketing Campaign of Doom. If you want to get just the straight facts of exactly what happened on the production that we publicly know about, watch that video. Today, I'm going to be probably mixing hard facts and interpretation and educated guesses. We can assume that the production of Final Fantasy Versus 13 basically stopped somewhere around like 2008 and did not resume again until after 13 came out, which was late 2009 in Japan, early 2010 for the rest of us. I think that's right. I'm pretty sure that's the time period.
Yeah, it's around, yeah.
So with this in mind, Nomura is splitting his attention between Versus 13, BBS, Days, and Coded, but I say that with a wink, with regards to his attention. And then you say to yourself, okay, great. So now production on Versus 13 probably actually got properly started around the ending of 2009, early 2010, which adds up with us getting a, 7-minute long gameplay trailer in 2011. And it's like, oh, sweet, the game's moving. It's happening now, right? Like that lines up. So then that makes me go, well, at this point, his attention was divided between a game that was moving aggressively slowly. So slowly that it was probably a big part of why the discussion about should Birth by Sleep be on the PS3 or the PSP became put it on the PSP. Because, if you're trying to make a game and the only engine you have is literally on fire and productions are not moving forward, why would you go, yeah, let's add another game to the pile of PlayStation 3, right? I think when you're a guy who makes video games for a living and you like making video games, you'd probably prefer to be making a video game. So it's perfectly believable to me that Birth by Sleep was getting a lot of attention during this time period. But once Versus 13 starts back up, maybe he's putting a lot more attention into that. And this tracks with a lot of stuff going on with Dream Drop Distance. There's a lot of interviews where normally you would expect, like, Mr. Nomura wanted to do this, or Tai Yasue, the co-director, wanted to do this. There's a lot of interviews for DDD where it's like, well, the staff had this idea. The staff wanted to do this. The staff were interested in this tone. The staff were interested in exploring X, Y, or Z. And I'm like, I think Nomura is splitting his attention between how many different projects and doing art for different projects. I bet he's the director of Dream Drop Distance like one day a week on a good week.
Yeah, right? For sure.
And then that leads to, okay, well, I got to write this game. Because, he also said in an interview, he said, this is not me making jokes. He was like, he walked into a boardroom meeting and said, I want to make a game on the 3DS. I don't know what. I don't have an idea for it, but I want to make a game on 3DS. He said that in an interview. He just thought 3DS was interesting hardware. I want to make a game on 3DS. And again, if it's circa 2008 and like Days is wrapping up, BBS, your work on BBS is wrapping up, and Versus 13 is still on fire behind you, I just want to make a video game, right? I just want to make a game. So that it makes sense. And that's not, I don't say that as a judgmental thing at all. But you then go like, okay, but then DDD is happening and he's working on, now he's like, okay, but I'm working on Versus now. And the entire plot of DDD is just Sora and Riku going on a side quest. And it ends with all of the villains showing up and going, hey guys, Kingdom Hearts 3 is going to be really exciting, and then leaving. And that's the game. And so part of that is me as a consumer. I'm like, I paid for a crummy commercial. Be sure to drink your Ovaltine.
Yeah. You remember the ending where like Sora and Riku are standing in the light and it makes like a 3, and everyone was freaking out over that at the time. We're like, whoa, Kingdom Hearts 3 confirmed.
Yeah, see, that didn't make me excited. That made me go, oh no.
Oh man.
Because the and the other part of it was, other than just like I've now been sold a product that was 20 hours long and it ended with people telling me that something exciting would happen next time. That's not that interesting to me. I'm not going to talk about DDD too much right now, but the key part, the reason I got onto this is because the real bad decision making there to me is, if you're a writer and you're writing a serialized story, especially in the world of video games where games take like 5 years to make, don't tell people exactly what you're going to do.
Right.
Not just because it sucks the hype, it could potentially suck the hype out of the sales, but because out of not like literally sales numbers, out of the sales of the proverbial boat, but because, like, what if you change your mind? And I'm thinking, and DDD ends with, hey, okay, so here's what's going to happen. 13 bad guys are going to fight 7 good guys under these exact circumstances, and if these circumstances are violated, the bad guys' plan won't work, and if these and they could do that, and like we are explained all of these rules, so it's like, oh, okay, the finale of Kingdom Hearts 3 can only play out like one way, right? And he has this rule of like, and these are the characters that are going to be there, and I've got this roster that I need to populate, right? And he wrote that in 2008 to 2010, right? And Kingdom Hearts 3 came out in like 2019. What if he didn't want to write that anymore?
Yeah.
What if he just completely lost interest in that because, I don't know, maybe his life went through some major upheaval because the personal project he'd been working on for 8 years was taken out from under him, and he's put back on another game where he wasn't allowed to take major risks and where he'd already said exactly what he was going to do next time. I don't know, just a crazy idea that I have. But to me, that's also part of why I've been saying since 3 came out that, like, if nothing else, Neo Heartless said he did change his mind. He made KH3 into a KH4 commercial.
That's exactly what I was thinking, right? Yeah.
A little bit of a worry there.
Yeah.
So that to me is like, thank goodness with regards to 4. I don't know if 4 will be good or not, but I guarantee it's going to be more interesting than what was going on in 3.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, right? People are like talking about all these expectations of, oh, he's going to do Versus 13. Oh, we're doing this. Oh, we're doing that. We don't know what he's doing because he's told us absolutely nothing. There will be a Tokyo-looking city. A guy named Yozora will be involved. And somebody named the Master of Masters will be there. Who is that? I don't know. Even if you played the mobile game, you don't really know. So I think that if nothing else, we've got this situation now where we don't have this harsh, like, external force coming down on the narrative saying this is what it has to be about. And that to me is the most interesting and hopeful thing about these upcoming entries in the series, because like realistically, maybe Nomura had an exact plan of what he wanted to do with KH4 circa, like, I don't know, 2017, 2018, right?
Right.
If he's completely changed his mind since then and does something else, none of us are ever going to know.
Right.
And that's, that's pretty neat. And you prefer those kinds of, you prefer that kind of setup to the alternative. But yeah, it's an interesting situation because with the development of Versus being as fraught as it was, and with as upset as Nomura seemed to be about it, and with as passionate as he seemed about the material, it's easy to look at it and go, well, obviously he wants to redo that again. But then it's worth saying he came up with those ideas at this point over 10 years ago. So who's to say if he's even as invested in the specifics of whatever was going to be going on with Noctis and Stella as we are, right? Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's like, yeah, I'm kind of over Versus 13. I just want to make a game set in a dark, rainy, nighttime city that looks like Tokyo, and everybody's going to be wearing nice clothes because I think that's just the stuff that he likes. I think he'd make a dozen games set in Tokyo if he could get away with it.
See, I'm of the mind of both, right? Like, I'm of the mind that is what he's into, and I'm of the mind that he specifically has like a very specific fondness of Versus, right? Like, I think that he has wanted to make Versus for a long time, and I think that he just genuinely has not let go of it. Sure. I think that the communication that he's gone through to, and again, because I think that you can write off a lot of the Virum Rex stuff as, arbitrary to his taste, but I think that like he goes out of his way to do a lot of very specific things that relate back to Versus that are so specific to it that it's just like, this isn't just coincidental, right? And
no. I'm just saying hypothetically.
Right. No, for sure.
At absolute minimum, it is being sold as I remember Versus 13. But also like this is a you remember the part at the ending of Kingdom Hearts 3 where Sora dies? I mean, of course you remember, but where he dies the first time,
right?
And he goes to the place with all the stars, right?
Right.
And there's that whole scene where he's talking with all of these stars that have regrets about their life, right? These are all dead people who have some manner of regret about something that they went through in life. For the record, number one, that's I think my favorite part of the entirety of Kingdom Hearts 3, just that one bit. It has, I think, the strongest writing of the entire game. And I'm like, ooh, I think Nomura wanted to write this. I think he had some kind of idea for like dying with regrets and words left unsaid. I think he kind of botched it with regards to Sora because like KH3 didn't wind up actually being the big team up game. So we didn't get like that contrast of like, we didn't spend enough time with the other characters to like be like, oh yeah, they're finally together, to number one, be bummed out that he died. And number two, to get some kind of character drama going where it's like, oh crap, we didn't get to resolve that issue. It's like within the context of 3, if Sora had, instead of at the last 2 seconds as a twist, if he had dramatically died in a confrontation with Xehanort, like that would have felt like not a good ending, but it could have just felt like an ending. You know, there wasn't really like a big dangling thread of like, oh my god, what about? Because I mean, he even does the little Palpu thing with Kairi, and like everything's resolved. It's like so it doesn't quite fit. But that whole sequence where they're talking to all the dead stars and about all of their regrets from life. That part is, number one, extremely emotionally resonant, and I can't help but think, wow, here's a scene where Sora is literally seeing the lights of expiring souls.
Yeah.
and I'm like, there's this whole thing in Versus about how Noctis and Stella have some kind, because of a near-death experience they had in their youth, they can see a mysterious light in the sky that is supposedly the gateway to the beyond that opens when people die. And there seemed to be implications that they had some kind of ability, maybe not a premonition, but they could in some way like sense when someone was going to die, right? And I'm like, this feels like something from another game when it shows up in Kingdom Hearts 3 out of nowhere. And I'm like, we were just doing this whole thing with like, we teamed up and we had a bad anti-fight scene and all got killed by a tornado, and now we're just here and suddenly just like the pathos is off the charts. Where did this? It feels like it came from another video game. Whoa! So no, I mean, I think there's definitely things that are getting. I think there's already literally been things recycled from Versus 13, and I bet you anything that's one of them.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
Scene.
Even with Quadratum, like Strelitzia refers to it in the English subtitles. She says something like an afterworld, but if you listen to the Japanese or read the Japanese subtitles, she calls it Shin no Sekai, which is World of the Dead, is what she calls it. It's a lot more. Yeah, it's a lot more explicit in the Japanese version. I'm studying Japanese right now, so I was like, oh really? And then I ran it through some people and like, yeah, that means World of the Dead. So I was like, oh really? And so the fact that this takes place in the World of the Dead, and that the uncanny resemblance of Quadratum and Insomnia both taking places from, inspiration from the same places in Japan, and, Insomnia being this, Lucius, I should say, being this nation of Reaper worship, and Quadratum sort of being this place of death as well, and there being like a parallel there between the Reaper worship and this place of death. I think that for me is already kind of an interesting sort of parallel. And then also you have all these characters now that have Noctis's exact design silhouette too. And I guess ultimately what I'm wondering, and I guess this is kind of leading into like the next question too, is sort of like, what do you think this is all leading up to? You think, you don't think that Nomad is trying to ultimately reboot Versus? I don't really think that he is either. Do you think he wants to let fans know what the hints of the stories were through Kingdom Hearts? To kind of be like, yeah, this is what I had in mind for Versus? Or do you think it's just to reutilize ideas that nobody ever got to see and that he was really excited about?
I wouldn't be stunned if the closest we ever get to Versus 13 is like, oops, sorry, I bumped the mic there. Like the true, like you're talking about, like, you know, is he gonna put some hints in there? I think definitely. I think we're gonna see a lot of recycled elements. I'm imagining in my mind's eye. Do you remember like 4 or 5 years ago, one of the Half-Life writers released a short story that was just like, oh, here's just a thing that I wrote with a character named Green Man.
No,
right?
no,
it wasn't actually. It was like he released a document that was like it was like a short story that was like about not Gordon Freeman and not Alex Vance, and it was like, oh, this is clearly like the draft of Half-Life 2 Episode 3. I wouldn't be stunned if, like, 20 years from now, after Nomura's left game development, he releases like a manga or a book that's what Versus 13 was supposed to be. But I mean, it is interesting because we have a weird setup here where we have the new arc of Kingdom Hearts, which it's not called the Lost Master arc. What
it is. Yeah, it is called the Lost Master arc.
Okay, Lost Master arc. So I'm in a weird position there where I'm like, okay, let's think about this. Now, to be fair, maybe this arc is just gonna be a lot shorter than the last arc. The last arc took 20 years. Yeah. Maybe this arc will be like, 5 or 6. But I think about the Darkseeker saga is like, Xehanort as the final antagonist is not introduced until Birth by Sleep. That was a ways into the story. Now, whereas now we've already been, I wouldn't say introduced to the Master of Masters because he hasn't in what I would refer to as a character introduction been introduced. But the concept of him is out there, and he's already present in this game, as are the foretellers. So I'm like, well, how long can we drag out a story about this one villain, right? Are we gonna not even fight him in this game? Are we gonna fight him in Kingdom Hearts 5? Is he gonna be around and like just like a puppet master for like 3 or 4 games till we take this dude out? And I'm like, so who are the other antagonists? Just the foretellers? Just Braig/Luciu? What's gonna happen there? And one of the issues, it seems like, with Versus, with why when it became 13 it changed so much, or why when it became 15 it changed so much, was because it was always going to be like a multi-game story. It seems like whatever they were trying to do was not one video game. It seemed like it was going to be a series.
And you can still tell it in like the final product of 15, where right after chapter 9, it feels like they just shoehorned like an entire like 2 games worth of content into a couple of chapters, right?
Oh, for sure. And that, and then they tried to staple a few more games onto the back of 15 via DLC. No, I think that if nothing else, one region where we may see a lot of Versus 13 ideas re-explored, maybe less to do with the specifics of Noctis and the plot of Versus and whatnot, and more to do with the fact that he has a franchise that he knows is locked in, and he knows, unlike, when he did Kingdom Hearts 1, it was like, this could be a hit. It could not. It could get canceled. We might not do more. Who knows? Whatever. Which is kind of why that game ends the way that it does. I've always said that the ending of Kingdom Hearts 1 isn't a cliffhanger. It's like the ending of Calvin and Hobbes, where, like, I don't know if you're familiar with Calvin and Hobbes, but the ending of Calvin and Hobbes is the two of them get on a sled and they ride off into the woods, like, let's go have an adventure. And it's like, and then they continued to do what they've been doing for years. You just don't get to see it, right? It was like when Donald and Sora and Goofy run off into that field. It's like, oh, they're gonna go have more adventures, right? We didn't really need to see any of it if the series got canceled,
right?
And now we're in a position where, like, he knows the series is stable. He knows it's gonna be around for a while, and he's being a bit more meticulous about his planning. And at this point, because it's worth remembering that all the spin-offs were not even necessarily his idea in certain instances. Like Birth by Sleep seems like under normal it seems like if they had actually had Unreal at the time, like if they'd had a stable development engine, I think it's worth assuming that BBS would have come to PS3, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And we know that Days was external pressure of Nintendo coming in and say, hey, can you make a Nintendo DS game for us? Because the GBA one sold really well. And that Coded was, hey, can you make a cell phone game? Because cell phone games do really well in Japan, right? That era is kind of gone, right? So I think you've also got this position. You're in this position where we know there's going to be more games. They're going to be on this platform. This is about what the timeline looks like. This is where I'm focusing my attention. So if nothing else, his lingering ideas of a multi-game arc, I think that's the stuff that we're most likely to see adapted beyond the aesthetic.
Right.
If you want to see aspects of the plot that didn't survive to 15, what was he going to do here and there? I think he's got a multi-game arc in his head that he's deliberately withholding from us because he's learned not to tell us ahead of time, so that if he wants to change it, he's not in big trouble.
Right.
But so I think that's one area where we can really expect to see aspects of Versus coming through is in this big multi-game arc now, because I wonder, what is he going to do then? We have this one guy who's introduced as the main antagonist, and how does any of this relate? Because right now it's like, okay, Lucio and the Foretellers came through into normal Kingdom Hearts world, and they've got the black box, and that's where most of our characters are. But now Sora's in something called a fictional realm, which Nomura says that the people within Quadratum would think of Kingdom Hearts as would think of what we know as a fictional realm. And it's because there's some interview, I don't think I wrote it down.
Right.
One of the things that he said, or like I think one of the other things he said in like a Famitsu interview like a day or two ago, was like that a big focus of KH4 is going to be dueling perspectives, and like how one person can see something one way and another person can see something another way, which, by the way, was another explicitly stated theme of Versus 13. Because you'll recall, like half the trailers start with that quote from Hamlet about there is no such thing as good or bad, but thinking makes it so, which specifically what that means when you translate the Shakespearean language is there is no objective, measurement of whether or not something is good or bad. It has to do with your perspective on the matter. And so in an interview, he tells me that a big focus of Kingdom Hearts 4 is going to be two different realms that perceive each other in a particular way. Like that sets off major alarm bells in my head for Versus thematic things. Yeah,
for sure. I think what he kind of mentioned, like, too, was that, like, to the perspective of like Sora's world, they sort of view that as like fictional, unreality, and to like, yes. But like to the perspective of Quadratum, they would view the other side that way.
Well, there's a major theory, like right after maybe it was right after Remind, not after actual KH3, that was like maybe where because Yozora seems to recognize Sora, right? Like maybe where he comes from, Kingdom Hearts is a video game that he's played in the same way that there's a Verum Rex video game in Kingdom Hearts 2 world. But I mean, I don't know, what do you think on that same subject? What do you imagine like we're going to see get recycled into Kingdom Hearts 4 and going on from here?
I think if Yozora plays video games, he plays FF14.
Well, did you know there's a free trial up to level 60 through award-winning expansion Heavensward?
With no playtime restrictions. It's crazy. But like... okay. Man, it's kind of hard to say, but with a lot of Yozora's stuff, there's already a ton of recycled things from Noctis. And in fact, you can just tell that, like, even in... Because, like, the characters, like, weapons and such like that, while they aren't quite the same as, like, the weapons that Noctis are using, you can just tell that this is like a retooled version of the same concept.
It has a similar vibe.
Yeah.
The transforming sword is kind of the same thing as being able to summon any sword.
Right. And then the gun, and I guess like the idea of him using multiple weapon types in the way that he does is sort of what I can sort of see coming from. And also that weapon just, it has the same vibe to me as like the engine sword, but maybe like a little bit more practical because of the ways that it can transform too, right? So
it's a sword, but it is everything about it aesthetically is like the last 50 years.
Right. And then there's the Gigas, right? Which are definitely Magitechs.
Sure. Honestly, dude, I'm gonna be real with you. You're gonna think I'm a big stoop. I didn't even think about Magitech armor with relation to the. I think I was so caught up on Toy Story World that I never even processed them as like part of the like a thing that was going on.
Yes, the Gigas are 110% supposed to be Magitechs, right? Because that was something that Nomura was like super proud of, like with Versus 13. He's like, do you see the Magitechs in the trailer? You can use the Magitechs. You can ride the Magitechs, you can fight in the Magitechs. He thought that the Magitechs were so badass in that game. He was very proud of it.
I did think about that aspect of it, because I distinctly remember in my Kingdom Hearts 3 playthrough when Joey and I, when we were in that playthrough, got warped into the video game world, and you had that whole lengthy mech shooter sequence, and Joey was like, this is the true vision of Versus 13 sarcastically, and I was like, no, for real though. But in the 2011 trailer, Noctis gets inside of a mech and starts shooting things. Yeah. It's like, oh no.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it on that gameplay level, but I think it had slipped my mind since I recorded that video.
Yeah.
And I definitely did think about it really on an aesthetic level, because I thought of it mechanically. I didn't really think of it, you're right, like aesthetically and thematically.
Yep. And so I think the funniest thing, like, to me, that like the thing that would make me like throw my controller, not in a rage, but just in like a, oh my god, get out of here, is if we end up having to fight Kairi in the streets of Quadratum. Could you see it? Could you see it? I can see it. I can see it. I can see it happening.
Oh,
we fight Kairi in the streets of Quadratum, and it's like a shot for shot. Because you know how like at the end of Remind, where there's that shot for shot remake of the trailer, dude. The only thing I can think of with that is, what if we have like the shot for shot remake of like that moment with Stella, but it's Kairi instead.
Unless he saves it for Unless he saves it for the Verum Rex standalone game. Because there was specifically, you may recall, in KH3 or Remind, one of the two, when you're talking to the star that is, we now, like, hard confirmed it's not Stella, right? Mm-hmm. She basically says something to the effect of he, in this case, Yuzora, he, like, doesn't remember me. He would be distressed if he knew about what happened to me, but he doesn't, and he doesn't remember me. So you could even just have, literally, she comes back and he doesn't know who she is, and you do the Noctis and Stella stare down.
Oh man, I feel like if there is one thing that completely baseless, I'm not basing this on anything other than the fact that we know that this game is like loaded with homages to Versus. But like, if there was one thing I feel very confident that they're gonna do, it's going to be that moment, right? Because all these references tend to be stuff that's very specific to the trailers, at least that we know of. That's what right. So
because he's trying to sell it to us.
Right. Exactly. By the way, like, what was your reaction like when you first saw that shot for shot recreation in Remind?
I also don't remember what my initial reaction was. I only remember like when I showed it to somebody else and was making fun of it. After I don't remember what my initial reaction. I think honestly, I think I was tired, because I think it was right. I think it was right when Remind came out, and Remind, other than like the combat, was kind of a turd. I think I just kind of rolled my eyes. I don't think I was too impressed. I know that's probably not what people want to hear, but I think at that moment in time I was just kind of tired, and I'd rather see something new than like him trying to shove this story that cannot work in this setting into this setting, which is also why I think he's not. I think it's not Versus 13, but I think it's beneficial to sell it as Versus 13.
Right.
I could be totally wrong. I could be totally wrong, but I get the feeling that that's a maybe misdirect is too strong of a word, but I had no strong feelings really about when Luxord is driving that car, and I guess a strong feeling, a reaction is, I have been wondering for a while, how are we going to split the perspective now that we've basically got two different dimensions that we're dividing the story between. Because we've got the foretellers in one dimension, and we got the Master of Masters and Sora in the other dimension. What is the story even going to look like now? And saying, hey, some of these Organization 13 guys whose origins we do not know, maybe they're from here, right? Like that could be a way to drag some of our other characters into Verum Rex setting, right? If Luxord shows up. If Demnix shows up, he's been evasive about where Demnix is from. Demnix could be a Verum Rex. He feels like he'd fit in that kind of setting, because he's kind of just a normal guy, right? He just wants to sit around and play music. Yeah. I feel like you're walking down the street in the open world of Verum Rex, and like, you know that thing that happens where you're walking in a video game, but like suddenly the camera like swings out of your control and the character keeps walking because a cutscene starts? You're walking down the street in Quadratum and like there's this guitar music coming from somewhere, and the camera does that, and it zooms in on a dude just sitting on a milk crate on the side of the road playing guitar with the open case for cash, and it's Demnix. And Sora's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, I live here.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I love that. And that also kind of resolves some of the mysteries with him too, because I know for a while there was kind of like running theories if he could be the master of masters and all. Yeah, all his like, or like what his true nature was, because he was acting kind of sus for a period of time. So that makes sense, and that would probably actually tie him in a good way. And I think, like you said, that also makes sense to tie in like a lot of the, you know, sort of existing characters that we have, a lot of mysteries surrounding that we just don't know what those mysteries are leading into. And narratively speaking, that's a good way to make them relevant without, you know, just completely having to come up with a brand new cast and like having two completely unrelated threads going on that don't ever intertwine in whatsoever, which would be
it's gonna be
a bad idea. Yeah, so
it might be that Sora concludes his stint in the realm of fiction after one game, but then the plot threads continue in a standalone Verum Rex game, right?
Right.
And then like after Kingdom Hearts 5 and 6, maybe we're wrapping up this plot thread, and like the one, and like the spin-offs we've gotten are like a Verum Rex game or two, and maybe the plot lines converge, maybe they don't. That's something I could see, but that's a realm where I do wonder, because I mean, I have to assume that even though he's talked about making a game just called Verum Rex, I assume Yozora is a copyright Walt Disney Company character, same as Sora is a copyright Walt Disney Company character. So I don't know if it's going to be a situation where it's like, yeah, Verum Rex is just a Square Enix video game that happens to be published by the Walt Disney Company. Like, what's gonna happen there?
Yeah, how do you do that, right? Yeah,
I need, because it could be that they basically signed a thing that's like, hey, Verum Rex is like a Final Fantasy character, and we, or rather, Yozora is like a Final Fantasy character, and we own him. That's ours. We're gonna feature him in this the same way we feature FF characters, but he's ours.
Right.
And then maybe after they kick Sora out of Quadratum, we can just do a story about Yozora and the boys, and it's just its own thing, and it's not connected to Kingdom Hearts.
Right,
but he might be a Disney character. We don't really know that yet, I don't think.
Right, we don't have any firm knowledge on how that works, and that's what sort of confuses me, right? Because if Quadratum, and if Sora's going to be in Quadratum, I assume Yozora's there. So what is Yozora doing the entire time that Sora's there, right? Because do we have like two protagonists? Is it going to be like a split protagonist thing, or? I
mean, we got this whole thing where where at the ending of Remind, Yozora's like, I was brought to this place, right? And they fight. It's like, were they in Quadratum when they fought? Or was that a projection of Quadratum? Or are there multiple Quadratums? Does he come from real Tokyo, not realm of fiction Tokyo? Like, I mean, there is we know so little that I hesitate to offer any in-depth speculation on where it's going to go.
Right.
But I mean, I honestly think that's a good thing. I think that's a solid, like, parachute, I guess. It gives both the audience something to look forward to and speculate about, which Kingdom Hearts fans love doing, and it gives Nomura and the rest of the creative team. Because sometimes I hesitate to just say Nomura, because it's like, it's not just one dude making these games.
Yeah.
Even though he has been apparently ghostwriting the scripts for most of these games since days. I mean, it's not just him making creative decisions, and I think it's really unfair to pin both mistakes and miracles on one dude. There's a lot of people making these games,
right?
But yeah, I don't know. I have a hard time. Like, I don't really want to call any hard shots on where I think it's going to go, because we don't know anything. I mean, we don't even know who. This is something else. I guess this is something else that I kind of want to talk about in general, if you don't mind.
Oh, please go.
I'm going to jack this for 1 second. I think I have some notes somewhere here. I wrote some stuff down. I still use pen and paper, believe it or not.
I can't write anymore. I can't, man. I can't write anymore. I can't do it. I can't. I try to write, and man, dude, it looks like a first grader after he's had too much sugar. Because
that was so much harder.
Yeah.
I don't really write anymore. I can't write anymore.
No, I physically can't. I try to do it, and I'm like, I can't write the letter A.
That got me. Anyway, no, but I mean, I think I saw you talking about this on Twitter or somewhere, but I mean, everybody's talking about, right? Like I saw people talking about, somebody posted somewhere, it's like, I've played every Kingdom Hearts game. Who is this Strelitzia lady? She's from the mobile phone game. Right? There's a lot of talk about like how, you know, I mean, on one hand, I think that the hardcore Kingdom Hearts fan who goes, it's very easy to get into the series, man. Just all of the games are on PlayStation now. Just buy them and play them / watch them. Right? I think that number one, it's a bit of a simplification. It's a bit of a simplification.
A bit, yeah.
Number two, the material is so dense that even just putting it all in one place is a bit of a, you know, it's still a bit of an ask for people. But like the mobile phone game in particular is not digestible, right? Like, I mean, the you know, Days and Coded got turned into not very good movies. Like I'm a noted Days fan, and like I think that movie's bad. It's like a bad way to experience the story of the game. But yeah, and like, you know, people are like, oh, but you can watch the cutscenes for Coded, and I'm like, well, first of all, not Coded, sorry, for Union Cross. There are too many of these games. There are simply too many of them. You can watch the cutscenes for Union Cross, right? You can download the app or watch them on YouTube or whatever. People will say, and so it's easy to get through this stuff. And I think that's on one hand unfair, but on the other hand, people will go, am I really expected to play a gacha mobile phone game to keep up with the plot of KH4?
Right. I think people also too, not to butt in, but I think that people look at they look at accessibility as in like just literally accessing the material and not the amount of effort that actually goes into being able to really grasp and resonate with the material.
Imagine if it was like you have to read the Silmarillion before you're allowed to read or watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I mean, it's accessible. The book's right there.
Yeah, just read it. Yeah, exactly. Read it. Yeah, just read it.
Idiot.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
And you have to complete at least one like Middle-earth tabletop role-playing game with your friends. But it's not that hard. All you need is pen and paper and dice, bro.
Right.
But no, my feeling is that while on one hand, the hardcore Kingdom Hearts fans saying, oh, it's easy to get into it, it's easy. I think that's not quite fair. I also think that on the other hand, like, am I really expected to consume this material to understand what's going on? I think, I talked about this a bit when there was that big, I say blowout. It didn't really wind up amounting to anything. There was a bunch of FF7 news last year. They announced the First Soldier, Ever Crisis. I talked a bit in that. People were like, am I going to be expected to play Final Fantasy Fortnite to understand the plot of Part 2? And I'm like, no. I've studied the ways of these people. There will be, after you get 5 victory royales, you'll unlock a secret message that's so obscure that it doesn't mean anything. And then when you play Part 2, you'll go, oh, that must be the thing that the secret message was like a reference to. Mm-hmm. But when other people who haven't gotten the secret message from First Soldier play Part 2, then that thing will be emerging from the same nebulous nothing realm that the people who had the cryptic hint. Like, right, they're really on the same page. And in that same vein, I'm like, oh, okay, all right. The Master of Masters is our new main antagonist, right? Presumably. He was introduced in a mobile phone game. This is unacceptable, right? I've watched that mobile phone game, and I'm going to tell you everything that I know about that there Master of Masters, all right? He is mysterious. He's kind of playful. He claims and seems to want to fight the darkness, and he doesn't care about collateral damage and who gets hurt along the way, right? That's all I got.
Yeah.
And also, you're going to get mysterious and playful in 5 seconds of Ray Chase performance when he walks on screen in Kingdom Hearts 4, right?
Right.
And for another thing, this is kind of an unrelated issue, but if we take playful out of that, I just described Xehanort. But, you know, mysterious, since he wants to fight the darkness and save the light, doesn't care about collateral damage. We've kind of done this before, but whatever. And then in the same vein, it's like Strelitzia shows up at Sora's front door in that trailer, right? It's like, who's this? Well, I played the mobile phone game. Let me tell you what I know about her. She's kind of shy, and she had a crush on the player character. And she's dead. And you know, so it's like when she opens the door and Sora sees her for the first time, anybody, like somebody who hasn't played the mobile phone game can basically just experience her as a new character.
Right.
You know, like I'm saying, imagine an alternate version of that scene where the Union Cross game doesn't exist, and just a character shows up and says, "Hey, Sora, you and I are both, you know, this place is a world full of life, but for us, it's more like a land of the dead because you and I are both dead and we're stuck here." And this was just a new character who was introduced to be like someone who's also dead in this realm who can tell Sora about it, right? It's like functionally the same thing, except that now it gets to be played as a clap moment for hardcore fans.
Right.
And I think that in the same vein, it's like I couldn't tell you a single character trait for like any of the foretellers, except like that Aced the bear is like kind of a dumbass and mistrustful, and like I don't know, dude, I've watched that movie with all 5 of them many times now. Usually at gunpoint, but I have watched it many times, and I couldn't tell you anything about any of them. So like, you know, it's you know, they're all blank slates. So when those guys emerge from those portals at the ending of Kingdom Hearts 3, they are emerging from a void and on screen with essentially the same amount of context if you're just a guy who's playing Kingdom Hearts 3 as you are if you're somebody who's playing the mobile game. So, you know, in that vein, I'm like, I don't know both how much, I don't think this game is really going to expect you to have a lot of Versus 13 knowledge. And I think that all of these characters, and it's the part of why it's hard to call where all of this is going, is because I couldn't tell you the first damn thing about the Master of Masters, except that he claims by the time you get to like the last 5 updates of a cell phone game that he's maybe fighting the darkness, but it seems like he doesn't really care about who gets hurt because he's very big picture. And that could be a lie. I don't know. So, you know, that's why I feel that it's kind of, I find it more interesting to talk about the metatextual than to make guesses and stabs at like what's going to happen, because we have like practically negative information. In fact, if anything, I would say that our knowledge of Versus 13 is probably just going to throw us off stuff, because I wouldn't be stunned if he uses like throws in imagery from Versus that we know and uses it to be like, hey, this is what's happening, and then ganks it out from underneath us. That would be very Nomura, and not even in a way that I would be mad.
What? Nomura liking subversion of expectations? No way. That's impossible. You know what my theory about what's in the black box?
I want to hear your theory.
Oh, I know what's in the black box.
I'll tell you right now. Me, black box, smooth brain. I got no ideas and I don't care. But what's your black box theory?
Versus 13's in the black box. It's a Blu-ray of Versus 13. You open the black box right there. PS3 case.
It's in a PS3 case though.
Yes,
and there's no PS3, so we can't.
Yeah, you can't play it. That's what's gonna happen. That's gonna be the big reveal. That's the big reveal.
There's no PlayStation 3.
Okay, so
don't forget about the wild card, says Aquafolia, that Luxord gave. Dude, I'm willing to bet, especially now that we know that Luxord is like in Versus 13 world, that's gonna be like his card is literally, it's gonna be like his business card for his like valet service. I'm just now thinking of this. It's like he's gonna be like your fast travel system.
Oh,
you're gonna pull out your cell phone and pull out the card, and Sora's gonna be like, "That's weird. There wasn't a number on this before when I was in my world." And he's gonna punch the number in, and a limo's gonna pull up, and Luxord's gonna roll down the window and go, "Hello, Sora. Get in the back. I'll take you wherever you want to go," or some crap like that. That just now came to me.
Oh my god!
I'm locking that in. I'm locking that in as my prediction for KH4.
The gummy phone's gonna become like an Android like smartphone.
It's gonna become an Android Galaxy.
Oh god,
it's gonna transform.
Oh my god, yeah, it'll change to fit the shape of the world.
He's gonna be like, I just learned how to use the old one. Why do they keep changing them? And he's gonna look right at the audience for like the applause, right?
Yeah.
Like, yes, smartphone joke. Woohoo!
Instagram will definitely look different. In Quadratum.
Oh no! You just awakened the fact that that's absolutely going to be a feature in Kingdom Hearts 4 again.
Oh my god!
I did not like the Instagram loading screens, and it's going to be not only in 4, it's going to be more cringe.
Yeah, because it's going to be like realistic.
Because Luke Skywalker is going to be posting on Instagram by the ending of the game. he's going to take a selfie of himself with Vader with the helmet off when he's dying on the shuttle landing platform, hanging out with my dad.
Oh no!
100% gonna happen.
Oh man! So I got a couple more topics here. While we're doing those, I want audience to kind of just, if you guys can go ahead and start putting in like your own questions, audience. Please try to highlight your questions so that I can more easily find them once we do get around to the questions. So if y'all can go ahead and do that, and then we'll move on to the next topic while people are sending in their questions, which is, what is the release window you foresee for this game?
2 to 3 years.
2 to 3 years. That's kind of where I'm at too. They said early development. They have to port this thing to Unreal Engine 5, which is not nearly that bad because moving from 4 to 5 is, I would imagine, not that difficult. Yeah. Well, if you're on 4.25, that's the caveat that people don't seem to realize, because I see a lot of people are just kind of under the assumption that you just have like an Unreal Engine 4 project, and no matter which version of Unreal Engine 4 it is, you can just plop it into 5 and then it works like the exact same. And people are, in fairness to, I guess, to a lot of people, is that it has somewhat been marketed that way, that you just, any Unreal Engine 4 project is going to go into 5 really easy and seamlessly. It's really any Unreal Engine 4.25 or later project will port into Unreal Engine 5 easily. Obviously, they're probably using Unreal Engine 4.25 for this project, which is why they're bringing it to Unreal Engine 5. But the thing to note is that if you are bringing that 4.25 project over, well, 4.25 came out in like 2019. So that tells me that the earliest this game has been in development, possibly at the very latest, is 4.25 or later. So that means 2019 or later. So this game's only... That's my feeling. So first of all, I didn't know any of that. So thank you, because I haven't done any reading about that. Yeah.
I mean, my thought is like, I don't see why they wouldn't have started on 4 right away, especially because especially at this point, Square seems to be very cognizant of like their reputation of how long it takes for games to release, and their projects, their timelines are becoming bigger, but their sales are going up, so there'd be an incentive to get stuff out sooner. And since it seems like there was a knowledge that like we're gonna do 4 right away. I mean, there were interviews at the time where they're like, there'll be one thing and then 4. And it was Melody of Memory, which was developed by another team in Unity. Right. And like, it's like not Melody of Memory. Remind didn't have any new assets, pretty much.
Right.
I mean, like there was a bit of more of like the Scala ad Kylum town, and I guess like they had to design the arenas for the boss fights. That was about it. Yeah. There was technically, like, they designed a bit of the Quadratum map, but guess what? I think that was stealth, like, KH4 assets being built, you know?
Yeah, it was, for sure.
It's perfectly believable to me. You know, a lot of the later end, you know, development staff that would be doing things like cutscenes, gameplay tweaking and balancing, like those folks working on the DLC, while you have the rest of the team getting started on new product. I think it's perfectly plausible that KH4's development started relatively quickly after what's the video game? The KH3 that came out before. Right. Not coming to me.
Right.
Hold on a second. I am getting a phone call that I texted them saying, I'll talk to you later, and they're still calling me, so it may be urgent. I need to step away for 1 second.
Yeah, no. Yeah, go ahead. Right. Go ahead. I got you guys until then while he's handling the phone call. More or less, I'm thinking 2025. They said early development, and, you know, honestly, even like if we're like a year from a game's release, that's like late development, right? Like, if Final Fantasy 16 is coming out like next year, like right now would be considered late development, because a lot of stuff happens, particularly within that last year. Mostly like a lot of quality assurance and a lot of fixing bugs and a lot of polishing and stuff like that. So that's like late development, and that's like a year even for the game that comes out. So with early development, that to me means 2025.
Oh, we were saying 2025 window for KH4.
Yeah, so that's my Sally prediction is 2025 for KH4, because I think if they are in early development, that means that they have a long way to go, right? Because even like a year before a game comes out is like late development, right? Like
sure.
even if it's like a year out, right? Because that's when they start rolling out like the marketing material, things really look like a finalized product and all these other sorts of things. So early development tells me that there is still like a long stretch of stuff to go. And just looking at previous releases, I think 3 years with no major development problems sounds about right to me. Mm-hmm. And when we look at other massive AAA Japanese titles, I mean, even 3 years can be considered optimistic. How long has Breath of the Wild 2 been in development? And we still haven't. Breath
of the Wild 2 is never coming.
Yeah, and so I think
especially now that Elden Ring is out.
Yeah,
I'm willing to bet the release of Elden Ring put another 6 to 8 months on the development of Breath of the Wild 2.
Elden Ring changed a lot for like open world RPGs. Mm-hmm. Everyone's got to be looking at that title right now, because it is probably one of the best open world RPGs I've ever played personally. Mm-hmm. That Elden Ring changed the whole game for me. Like I cannot look at open world RPG design quite the same anymore after Elden Ring. Such a fantastic game.
Ooh, let me answer a chat question really quickly. I'll do it because I know I can answer it really fast.
Yeah, no,
Over
please.
Under on Disney Worlds being better implemented in 4. I'm not going to give specific numbers. Don't count on it.
Yeah.
Don't count on it being better. I'm going to tell you right now. KH3 made a lot of money. That means they're going to pay more attention, not less.
Right.
I would not anticipate it being the only hope really is that part of the difficulty with implementing Disney content is that now in these last couple of entries, they've had individual people involved. Like when Kingdom Hearts 1 and some of the other early games were made, it was like a couple of people from the company were like, that looks good. But with these more recent entries, there were like the people who are specifically in charge, like the Frozen IP or of the Tangled IP or whatever, sticking their head in the door going like, how's everything going in there with the Kingdom Hearts level, the Japanese video game that we don't understand. You better not be messing it up. And it seems like the folks who worked on, like, for example, Big Hero 6, were at least a little bit more familiar, and the Pixar folks more familiar with and a little bit more involved and let them do more stuff, right? And so in that same vein, we don't need to talk about this a lot. If that is an ATST foot in the trailer and Star Wars does show up, I'm willing to bet Lucasfilm is like not, they're going to be like, yeah, do whatever. Adapt the movie and put your anime characters in there. Because think about this, right? You can already go to Disney World right now and you can buy Donald Duck dressed up as a Jedi in the gift shop for Star Tours, and you could do that since well before Disney bought Lucasfilm. So I would say over under on better implementation for like if Star Wars and Marvel show up, I think that they will be incorporated much better because I think the people who are in charge of those IPs are more used to this type of stuff than the tightly controlling like Frozen 2 is coming out, we have to be very careful type people. If like I don't know, if like Zootopia shows up, it's gonna be just as bad.
Right. And one could even speculate that perhaps the Disney Worlds were delivered better in 1 and 2 because they were from older properties where, the IP holders were, well, I shouldn't say IP holders, but the IP creators were not as nearly attached or involved with the direction of how they were utilized in Kingdom Hearts.
Well,
right?
I don't know if you saw these interviews, but we found out like a year or two ago that Kingdom Hearts 1 was basically created in like almost total secrecy.
Really?
It's like the whole elevator pitch story of like a Disney executive and a Square executive got in the elevator, and when they got off, the idea for Kingdom Hearts was a thing. That's kind of like it did happen, but the folklore really like expanded upon that. Shinji Hashimoto gave an interview about it a couple years ago, and then someone else who was like a former Disney Japan guy talked about it as well, like independently. And basically the Disney Japan guy explained, we in the Japanese office wanted to talk to Square about making a video game together. And one time I happened to get in an elevator at the same time as Shinji Hashimoto, and I said, hey, you work at Square, right? We want to talk to you about something. It wasn't that they happened to have a chance meeting. It was that they already had the plan.
Oh.
And that was the first time that the Square guys heard about it. So the Disney Japan offices met with the Square offices, and they talked a lot about what potential shape this could take, right? And they were talking and how this could look and maybe do this and maybe do that. And Nomura got attached and a team started getting built. And eventually the Disney Japan guys turned around and the Square guys were like, here's a build we have. And the Disney Japan guys were like, wait, no, we were still just talking. We didn't have approval on like this could be very bad. And then so like a little while after this, Michael Eisner was still the president at that time, and his whole entourage of sure 200 people were in Japan anyway for like I think they were building Tokyo Disneyland at the time. There's other stuff that they were interested in there as well. So he was just in Japan for meetings in general, right? They were having a general board meeting, and this dude, the guy from former Disney Japan guy who's given the interview, said they came up with a brilliant scheme, which was while Eisner was sitting in the room and they were going through their meeting and they're talking about all these other ongoing projects here with Disney Japan. He said, oh, and by the way, we also want to show you a little bit of the footage from the video game we're working on with Square Enix. You know, it's coming along pretty well. We want to show you a little bit of the early development footage. They showed him some footage of the game. Eisner went, yeah, that looks pretty good. Keep up the good work. That was implicit approval for the project. Eisner said it's good. Eisner said keep working on it. So boom, greenlit. So like a massive amount of work on that was done before anybody knew what it was. So I think that's a major reason why KH1 is the way it is, and why later games, even when you get to KH2, it's like this seems like it's much more tightly controlled, and like the worlds are always following the plot of the movies for the most part. I think that KH1 was made and like nobody in the States knew what the hell was going on until it was way too late. And probably the people at the States who did know were like, this is awesome. Then it came out and made a ton of money, and people at the top level were like, what is this? Who greenlit this? Eisner? I mean, good job, sir. But we need to have a discussion about how the next game in the series is going to go. I think that's what happened, and I don't think that it's going to improve anytime soon, because unfortunately, like it making more money means they're going to pay more attention, and it getting more confusing means the people in the company who already don't know anything or care anything about video games are just going to be even more out of touch with what's going on. And I don't know, obviously, I don't work at Disney. My guess is that the top level folks at Disney, their entire perception of the franchise is that weird thing that makes money off of weirdos that we don't understand. We just have to make sure that it doesn't damage our IPs while it prints that money. I think that's the entire perception internally at Disney. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, that makes so much sense to me. That makes so much sense to me about how they do that, because it does seem like I don't know, I kind of get the sense that Disney doesn't really intimately know or particularly care about Kingdom Hearts quite in the way that fans would want them to.
Yeah.
Because I think if they did, they would probably allow and even encourage more freedom for the creatives to do what they have to do at Square, like to be able to tell something more coherent without having to necessarily, like in 3, sort of make each world an advertisement for the movie that it's based on.
And that's why I say, like, if Star Wars or Marvel showed up, I think that those would be incorporated in much more interesting ways. Because Marvel, especially, you know, they're like that. The comics industry in general is do whatever.
Right.
And Lucasfilm, historically speaking, I don't just mean like new Lucasfilm. I even mean under Lucas's stewardship, was often a little bit too concerned with like canon, right? Like it has to be official. Whereas now they're like, Visions, do an anime, do whatever, who cares, right? I think that it'd be much more flexible.
So before we start taking audience questions, what's the project
sorry, real fast, I apologize.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I know we discussed ahead of time, maybe around 2 hours. I'm good. I got no bus to catch, so however long you want to go for, I'm good to go for.
Oh, okay. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah.
I mean, like if you said 8 hours, I might be like, I actually forgot about a thing, but I'm good to go for a while.
Yeah. Okay. I'm good too. So we're doing pretty good audience seems to really be enjoying this by the numbers that we got right now. So I think we're okay. So then
Yeah.
I'll knock these last two out, kind of out of order. And then we'll also get some audience questions. So you guys feel free to pour in some of yours. I see we already got some in here too. So I'll start answering those in a bit. What's the project that Square's working on right now that excites you the most?
Well, I know for you, I'm like literally, as we are sitting here, I'm stealing 6.1 time from you. And honestly, in some ways, I'm very excited to see what 7.0 is, because I'm like, I'm even though I'm not a huge 14 guy, I'm just like, what do they do now after we've walked to the end? Like, because I know that whatever they do will be interesting, right? So I'm like, ooh, I kind of want to see what's going on. I kind of want to see what's going on with that 7.0. But no, probably, I would say probably 16. It's between 16 or 7 Remake Part 2 for me, probably, in terms of what I'm most like anticipatory for. Because I don't know if you know this about me, but 7 Remake is like one of my favorite games of the last several years. I loved 7 Remake, and I know you and I have some disagreements about that game. Because people are like, oh, how can you like that game with the ending, Jacob? You say you like it and you never talk about the ending. He must secretly hate the ending, but he's trying to pretend like, nah, dude, ending's best part. I am all on board with the ghosts, dude. I am, especially because they're dead now, so it doesn't matter. They served their purpose. Now we're on to do whatever else. I am 100% on board.
This is your Kingdom Hearts fan coming out right now. No, I'm just playing.
No, dude, I mean, there are a lot of people who were like, when I said that I liked 7 Remake, a lot of my fan base were like, how can you like it when you complain about all this stuff from Kingdom Hearts? And I'm like, guys, I don't have issues with like Kingdom Hearts having crazy magic in it. I have issues with how like there's no characterization anymore. Like I remember I talked at one point, I was like, people talk about how like, what would the Final Fantasy characters do in Kingdom Hearts 3, right? And I'm like, to be fair, Kingdom Hearts 3 has too many characters and a threadbare plot, so sure, they didn't have anything to do. But I'm like in KH1, Squall, Leon, Aerith, Yuffie, Cloud, they had more to do in Kingdom Hearts 1 than Riku has to do in the entirety of Kingdom Hearts 3. You know, like none of the characters in KH3 have anything to do. They're all boring. They're all lifeless. Sora has some cool moments. The moment where Terra comes back is like the only supporting character who gets a cool moment. Terra's return, where he rips the thing off of his mouth in his shadow form, like that's kind of neat. But like, I mean, the crazy weirdo magic is not a problem for me. I like all kinds of separate crazy weirdo lore. To
clarify, it's not a problem for me either. It's
I know your problems with 7 in execution.
Right? Yeah.
I'm just making a general point. No, see, I find the execution to be brilliant. But maybe we'll talk about that some other time. But no, I just find that in general, like there's no drama really left in what's going on right now in Kingdom Hearts. The characters all were kind of feeling lifeless and spinning their wheels. Dream Drop Distance Cage. I mean, I like 0.2. I liked the Aqua Sad Times Club. Like that was actually fun. That felt like something was going on. But you didn't really have anything like that in 3, which is it just didn't feel anything. Whereas FF7 Remake is like, they have got such a tight grip on what made those characters tick, and they turn it up to the maximum, and that's what I want.
That part I like a lot. Yeah,
I shouldn't say I referenced Tim Rogers again, as if I'm not literally wearing a Tim Rogers t-shirt right now.
Oh, really? I didn't even.
I'm wearing the Truck Hack t-shirt, since he won't he won't make a replica of his Have a Tampa Shootout 1997 whatever shirt. He has his spiritual successor replica shirt. Sage Water Dragon says I'm wearing that same shirt right now. It's the best shirt that we're allowed to purchase.
Do I need to DM Tim and tell him this, or
you can do whatever you want to do. But no, he said something during the talk that he did with you a year or two ago now, where he was like, Final Fantasy stories are best when they're about simple characters in elevator pitchable situations. And like nothing about 7 Remake robs any of the characters of that. So I don't mind like those changes, you know? It was just that the story that was being told of those 4 characters and their relationships and how they develop. Like the relationship between Cloud and Barrett is so much richer in Remake compared to what they were able to pull off in
100%.
7.
100%.
And I know one of your other questions was about just talking about 7 Remake, so I guess we're kind of segue into that. But I don't know. My most anticipated product for Square right now, because I don't know what Yoko Taro is doing next. So since I don't know that, it'll be 16 or 7 Remake Part 2. What's yours? I would assume your answer is 7.0.
Oh man, 7.0 is really exciting. We are getting a graphical update too, finally. God, the characters' hair textures has been like, it's been such a huge issue for me with the game visually, because I think the game is actually still gorgeous in terms of art design, but it's been held back by the fact that it was designed to run on a PlayStation 3 for so long. And now that they are going back and they are doing a graphics refresh, basically an overhaul of like most of the assets and all the shaders and stuff like that. So the game's going to look really good. That's really exciting. I think actually my answer isn't 7.0. It's probably 16, because I've been playing 14 for a minute now, and just seeing what this team has been able to do in the context of an MMORPG, a genre that's almost not supposed to be story driven, lore driven maybe, but not.
You want to see what that team can pull off in another format.
If they can pull off what I feel like is the best story I've ever played in any video game, in a genre where you can't tell a good story. That's just been like the age-old mantra, right? Like if they can do that,
the accepted wisdom.
Right. And so if they can do that in an MMO, what can they do in a single player game freed of those restrictions that you don't have to deal with in an MMORPG? So that's really exciting. I am excited for 7R Part 2. I kind of went through phases. I know
you went through some phases.
Yeah, like when I first played Remake, I really, really, really did not like the story at all, and I still have a lot of criticism of it. Like if you were to pitch this to me again, I'm still sort of like, that's not a particularly great idea. But I enjoy it now, like in the same way in which I enjoy like the MCU or like a lot of shonen anime, where it's not my big brained story anymore. It's something that's more like potato chips. It's not my meal anymore. It's not my meat and potatoes. It's just carbs. Empty carbs that I like. It's really fun because I really do love the battle system. I love the way the characters were presented. I love like a lot of the way the dialogue is, like you were saying, like the enriched moments like Cloud and Barrett. But when it comes to the idea of the arbiters and how I feel like that meshes thematically with what the story of the original game was, it just becomes so hard for me to be like, that is such a great idea to be like, we're gonna revive this dead character, or we're gonna have fate be a physically manifested entity and we're gonna kill it, and we're gonna show you the ending of the original game and be like, that's the fate that we that's the bad timeline, we have to stop that, and with no context. And the delivery in particular of it being perhaps a remake sequel, or them having knowledge of the past and all this other stuff, and the inclusion of the compilation, which is like 20 years of material that could potentially gatekeep, maybe not gatekeep, that's not really the word, but make it less accessible for newcomers, and just all sorts of other issues with the delivery of Remake, having having Ketchi randomly show up during the play collapse, those sorts of things. Yeah,
I wouldn't have him show up.
And I don't know if you really listen to like the music in the original. Well, there is no music in playing in like the original play collapse. It's like silence, and you hear like muffled screams, and then it fades into like President Shinra, and then
I know. He plays music playing in the background diegetically. He's got opera music playing because he doesn't care.
And then in remake, there is like this really and tonally stuff like that. Just like is where like remake would lose me. Things with like the arbiters, like like how you mentioned that the arbiters are like out of the way now, but it's like, what did we get out of the? What are they? Right? So they're out of the way, but we don't even know what exactly is out of the way. There's basically no exposition on them that we really can like, definitively say. And so there's all these tonal and delivery issues that really hurt it for me. But after I replayed it on Intergrade, I have come to an appreciation for 7 Remake. I am excited for part 2. I still do love Cloud and those characters. It's pretty much always going to be a part of it. I got my Buster Sword, right? Yeah. I do love it. But there's a lot of things that I just have really mixed feelings on, and I don't know how they can actually construct a good story. Potentially, like if we are dealing with multiverse theory, that's going to be really weird, considering we didn't really even have time travel in 7 or the compilation.
Yeah, sure. Uh-huh.
I mean, some people have theories that maybe it existed, but there's nothing definitive that you can point to that say that they were explicitly building up to this and they wanted you to know. And if they were building up to it, it felt like they didn't want you to know, right? Like it's not like if you had consumed all that material, which most people in the West haven't, because so much of it was inaccessible, like Before Crisis, which doesn't have like an official English version.
Yeah, there's nothing for Before Crisis.
Right. So, to even necessitate any of that information is really hard to sort of have anyone get it, even if it was there. And so all these things are happening, and I just feel like it just would have been better if they just actually reset FF7, like completely. No compilation. Looking at the original game for reference even, but maybe not even like sticking that hard to the original game, but just actually being like, yeah, we're just rebooting FF7, like straight up. Would have probably been a better choice to me than trying to be like, we are somewhat rebooting it, but then we're also taking 20 years of information and making that potentially relevant to what's happening. And we're going to try to do both, right? Because I know everyone likes to use the word requel, but I don't think I think I've
heard requel before.
Yeah, no,
I like that.
I think Maximilian Dude's the one who popularized the term, but I do think that remake and sequel are things that are mutually exclusive, because I don't think you can be a remake of a story and a sequel of a story. And I think if you are both, at some point you have to choose which one you're going to be, because you can't really offer a satisfying conclusion otherwise.
So I haven't made any real content about 7 Remake since it came out, because frankly, any such undertaking for me would be akin, in order to satisfy me, would have to be akin to, like, it'd have to be like 10 hours long.
Yeah.
I'd have to do a playthrough of it and just talk the whole time, or I'd have to do a huge video, because I have a lot of thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And today, even though we said we're going over 2 hours, I know we people have been asking questions, and I'm sure you probably have picked out some you want to.
I got a couple. Yeah.
So I'm going to try and not. I'm saying this, it's going to be odd because I'm about to. I'm sure we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake for the next like 10-15 minutes here.
Mm.
But I'm going to try and keep this. I could talk about this for 10 hours, for real. On screen, just go. So I'm going to try and keep this contained. But I will say a couple things about it. And so I'm going to, instead of focusing on the content, I'm going to talk about context and my philosophy when it comes to remake. So I didn't really get into Final Fantasy until like 2007-ish. I kind of missed the bus until later on. And when I did, around the same time that I came into an understanding of what 7 was and how important 7 was also around the time that I came to the understanding that people saw that E3 demo for the PlayStation 3 where Cloud jumped off the train, and they were like, remake, remake, remake. And shortly after, I learned people have been asking for a remake since like 1999. Remake, remake, remake. And even with my newcomer's perspective, I felt like that was... I didn't have the words for it. I just knew it was a bad idea. Eventually, the words came to me better, but somebody else had the words well beforehand, and it's in Tim Rogers' review, in the Action Button review of 7 Remake. He talks about the story of the launch event for Final Fantasy XII in Japan, and the first customer who's first in line has been camped out for a week. Purchases is handed a copy of 12 by the president of the company. And would you like to say a few words, Mr. Final Fantasy fan? And he takes the microphone and he says, please remake Final Fantasy VII. This is a dude who camped out for a week to buy a copy of the new Final Fantasy game. And his statement is, please remake Final Fantasy VII. And in the Action Button review, Tim Rogers, I've referenced him several times during this, Tim Rogers says he went and talked to people about that afterwards. And some of the younger employees were like, haha, that's funny. And an older guy, I now realize that the older guy and I were on the exact same wavelength, even though I was too young to have the words, which was, what a philosophical nightmare. Because I'm thinking about something like, God, oh no, words. Come on, Jacob. Oh no, Orson Welles. Before Orson Welles died, he said to one of his friends, do not let Turner ruin my movies with his crayons. Because around the time, the colorization of black and white movies was becoming very popular, going back into movies that were shot in black and white and artificially adding color, right? Mm-hmm. And this was a big like consumer friendly thing of, oh wow, we get to sell all these movies again and say they're colorized now. Come watch, come watch It's a Wonderful Life in color now, right? And it's like these movies were shot in black and white, and the artists who understood what they were doing understood what they were doing with color and with shadows and with lighting, and it was a key part of the art. It was the limitation of the form and the technology they were working with at the time. And to take something like Citizen Kane and scribble all over it with color would be an act of vandalism. And I thought a lot about Original 7, and I'm like, okay, sure. He's got Popeye arms, and all the backgrounds are really low resolution. But I'm like, so much of what is accomplished in that game was accomplished exclusively because of the technological limitations of the PlayStation 1. So much of the art came from the form. And to divorce the art from the form, to me, makes it new art in that instance. And so when people talked about a remake, I was like, I don't know if these people know what they're asking for. Because number one, I understood even back then, like the scale of a game like 7, to remake it in 3D would be to more than quadruple its production, everything. Because the second you say, here's a pre-rendered background of a room, okay, now everything in this room you can look at from all 4 angles. That inherently means just at that level, you've quadrupled the amount of work. Yes, but that's just like, it's just like raw surface area textures of if you don't add a single damn thing to the game. And my whole thought process was, let's say that they did a faithful remake, even if they split it into multiple parts as they're doing right now. They did a one-to-one super faithful remake of the original game. And I know this isn't what you're suggesting. Right. You were talking about like doing a remake. Right.
I have to say this a million times because every time I approach criticism of remake, everyone's like, well, you wanted a remaster. Should have asked for a remaster. Should have asked for a one-for-one. And I'm like, listen, bruh, I'm not saying that I made videos before the game came out called like why Final Fantasy VII Remake can't be the same game. Yeah. And I talked about the exact thing you're talking about. And people still say, yeah.
There were people after the launch who did go, well, all I wanted was better graphics. And I'm like, you're a liar. Yeah. No. You didn't, when you were saying I want a 7 remake, you were pointing at that E3 demo. Guess what? That E3 demo that shows Cloud jump off the train, it has multiple camera angles. Guess what? That's full 3D. You didn't. You're a liar if you say that you wanted this. And the proof used to exist before YouTube got rid of dislikes. Because you remember the year before they revealed 7 Remake at E3 2015, there was the PlayStation Experience 2014. Yeah. And not Layden. One of those other guys walked on stage, and the live stream appeared behind him, and the whole audience went, oh, and then it just showed original 7, like, and now you can play it in 1080p on PS4. That video got disliked ratioed to oblivion.
Yeah, Square was getting shitted on so hard. Yeah,
everybody was so mad. If that was what you wanted, you would have said you wanted it when it happened, you fraud.
Right. Yeah.
But no, like, so my whole thing is, like, if they'd done the 1-to-1 remake at a massive scale, even if it had been excellent, if it had been like the best video game of the decade, the 3 collective 1-to-1 remakes, I think 2050 rolls around, 2045, 2050, guess what? Nobody's playing that remake.
Right.
Because what's the artistically, historically significant one? Oh, the one that was made on the PS1 that changed the entire landscape of video games.
Right.
When you're like, let's talk about the history of the video game Final Fantasy VII and why it's so significant, you're not going to go study the thing that was made under totally different circumstances for a totally different market with totally different intent and inspiration, even if it is a 1-to-1 remake.
Precisely.
Like, it would have been a novelty product that would have sold extremely well, and maybe would have even been good, but it would have been, to me, historically insignificant.
Right.
And I wonder about, for me, from the one thing I never considered was the insider perspective. For me, from the outsider perspective, that's how I feel, hearing the story of the guy who bought 12 and said, please remake Final Fantasy VII. Then I think about the internal. Now, I know Kitase didn't work on 12, but like, think about the people who did work on 12, right? You have just spent 5 years of your life making, at the time, the most technically sophisticated game the company had ever made. One of the most, like, 12 is mind-blowing for the time and the PlayStation 2 hardware.
Yeah.
Incredible video game. Imagine you have just spent all of that time working on that game. You've poured your heart and soul into this, all of your artistic intent, and it's a little bit shaky. Some stuff didn't come out the way you wanted, just because we know 12 had kind of a rocky development. But like, you finally made it, you've completed it, you've gotten there, you have made something that you are deeply proud of and that's very personal to you. And it's like, and in your soul, this is one of the best video games on this system of this time period. And the guy who waited in line for a week to be the first one to touch it says, please remake Final Fantasy VII. and I think about Kitase, right? Or Nomura, or Nojima, or any of them. And I'm like, how many incredible ass video games is Kitase's name attached to? Like, think about the body of work just on Kitase, right? Or on Nomura, or on any of them. How much legitimately incredible art they have made over the years. Even if you're like, I don't like 10 that much, I don't like 13, like, whatever. Like, legitimately, a body of work that any artist on the planet would be envious of. The amount of stuff these guys have gotten to make.
Right.
And imagine you're sitting around, and you're like looking back at your career, and everyone is like, yeah, that one thing you did 20 years ago was the best one.
Yeah.
Right? It's like... And then you sit down and say, okay, well, I'm going to remake it now. I'm 50, and it's going to take 10 years of my life, and I'm going to be like pushing on the door of retirement by the time that I finish remaking a thing I made 20 years ago. By then it'll be 30 years old, and I'm developing myself into my own grave here.
Right.
And I'm like, I think a lot of people saw the ghosts as like lashing out at fans. I think people have a tendency to take stuff way too personal.
Right, and I think that's a totally wrong interpretation of the Arbiters.
I remember people, I forbid anybody to start Last Jedi discourse in the comments of this video or chat. But very briefly, I remember people got so pissed off when Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi said, let the past die, kill it if you have to, we're gonna burn everything down. And people thought that was Rian Johnson, like, telling them that Star Wars was stupid, and it's like, that's the scene where he becomes the ultimate villain. That's the scene where he becomes the bad guy. And Luke's whole arc of becoming a hero is learning that that's incorrect, and tradition should be embraced.
Yeah.
People are like so attached to a thing I love that it sometimes they feel like they're being, it's coming at them.
Right.
And not like at the material.
I actually saw someone like interpreting like the dialogue of like Kingdom Hearts 4's trailer as Nomura saying like, hey, if you didn't like Kingdom Hearts 3, go play other video games. And I'm like, Nomura totally was like, you guys need to like immediately touch grass if you think that was like
it was something like, if this is not the fate that you desire, then go to another world and seek another fate, right? I think I saw the same post you're talking about. Someone was like, Nomura's telling haters that if they didn't like KH4, they should play something else. It's like, no, it's a message about how Sora died and he has to seek a new fate. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you should seek some grass if you think that's if you think that's like what he was saying with that commentary. It's just like, dude.
For me, the ghosts don't represent the fan base. They represent the external pressure of sitting down and going, I'm going to spend the next 10 years making something that, remember, think about it this way. Think about your Katase and you sit down and go, okay, it is time for me to spend the next 10 years remaking a product that I made in 2 years in the 90s.
Yeah, right.
I had 2 years of like this whirlwind romance of this incredible new story and all these new ideas and all this stuff, and I'm gonna sit down for 10 years and do the same thing that I did last time when I was a very different person. To me, if anything, because I do think the ghosts are somewhat metatextual, but I think they're more a meditation from a creator's perspective. And honestly, like we're living through this like ever since The Force Awakens, really, and Jurassic World, we're living through like this nightmare of remakes and redos, right? Of soft reboots and remakes and blah, 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 blah. And it's like the fact that that 7 Remake got existential about what it means to remake something and the external pressure on what that of what that would feel like, right? The fact that like they're making this and because every time the ghosts show up is because something's starting to diverge, right?
Right.
I think it represents more like the internal pressure, not the external fan pressure, but more the internal.
That's
pressure.
that's how I interpret it too.
Yeah. Should I change this? And the ending is saying I am now giving myself. It's also a sequel hook to get you to come back and play the next one, to get excited, to get you hyped for the next one,
to revive Zach.
Yeah, there was an interview where Katase was like, yeah, things are going to be mostly the same in part 2. Yeah, there's going to be some new stuff, but there's going to be, but it's going to be mostly the same. It wouldn't stun me at all if the overarching plot of 7 Remake is mostly the same until like the end of each game. Like I think you said this as well. A lot of people have said this. I think the final boss fight will be timelines converge and Zack and Cloud, like Zack from Terrier timeline and Cloud from Hound timeline are both going to fight Sephiroth together at the end, and then the timelines will unconverge and they'll go their separate ways. They'll give each other a big predator bro fist clasp as they're pulled apart into different timelines. But like the like I look at that whole thing as well. So for one thing, I was like, with the whole remake project, I was like, it's a bad idea, but maybe it'll be fun. I only started to get interested when I realized they were doing weirdo shit.
Right.
Like when one of the trailers, I think it was E3 of the year before, there's a bit where they're about to fight Airbuster, right? And President Shinra shows up and he's like, Avalanche, henceforth allies of wicked Wutai, right?
Yeah.
Like when that happened, I was like,
yeah, that was cool, right? Because I thought that made so much sense, right?
I mean, I'm going to be real with you. One of the worst things about 7 for me is like the entire middle chunk of that game is like you have that whole extremely focused, zeroed in Midgar section, which is so tightly put together. And it ends with Rufus showing up and he says, my old man ruled people with money. I'm going to rule them with fear. And I'm like, your old man just killed like 100,000 people, so I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but whatever. And you're like, okay, all right, he's bigger and badder than the last guy who just killed 100,000 people. Oh my god, right? And then like Rufus's involvement in the plot after that is like, Sid, I need to borrow your one-man prop plane so that I can go to Wutai to look for oil. Yes, I own an entire fleet of long-range bombers and the airship that I stole from you, but I'd like your plane. Like, it's like one of the biggest problems with that is that there's like, once they leave Midgar, the tension is like, find Sephiroth, right? It's like, okay, is Sephiroth doing something?
Right.
Like, what's going on, right? Adding the tension of like there's now a cold war with Wutai that might get hot. Like, number one, gives Yuffie so much more to do than she did in the original game. And number two, it's like, now that middle section of the game where like kind of not a lot was going on can become like this, we're watching the tension of this war mounting, and maybe it doesn't even happen. Maybe it becomes more like a Final Fantasy XII where the story's about preventing the war. But like I think about the parade in Junon, where it's like, yay, President Shinra, Rufus is the new president or whatever, right? That now becomes a declaration of war scene, where it's like, we are resuming hostilities with Wutai, right? It's a big military procession or something like that. Maybe the reason he goes and confronts Sid isn't, I need the tiny Bronco, it's, I am enlisting you at gunpoint to come back and be our ace fighter pilot, because you're the best pilot in the world. Right. And you're going to go bomb Wutai, and we don't care. We're going to shoot Shera. And he's like, go ahead and shoot her, because that's it.
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and see that's the stuff where I think that remake really fucking kills it. Like, and that's where I think like the genius of it currently resides in, is stuff like that.
Yeah, and with regards to the rest of it, it's like, I also think, because I think there's still spoilers for 7. I think they're still gonna kill Aerith. I think the whole reason that they did this and put the hope of we might not kill her is just so they can really freak people out when they kill her again.
I disagree.
I know what you're gonna say. What you're gonna say. You're gonna say, I think they're gonna kill Tifa.
No, that's not what I was gonna. Right. That's what I would say if I wanted to troll everyone. No, to me, I think that's a popular idea, that they're going to do it so that you have hope that you could save Aerith. But I feel like that actually ruins the idea of having hope that you could save Aerith. Yeah, no, it does. It does. Because to me, if she dies or she doesn't die, I won't be surprised either way now. Like, now I'm just like, they're playing with it too much. What would have subverted me harder was that if they just didn't say or do any, like, if the plan was still to kill her, what would have subverted it harder for me was to not have that thread, and then in the moment that she is supposed to die, she doesn't.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
That would have worked better for me. But now I just feel like if she does die, I'm not surprised, and if she doesn't die, I'm not surprised. It's just gonna be like, yeah, they went with that one. But
I think the thing a lot of people aren't considering is that if Aerith doesn't die, like, the plot can't happen. Because, like, the whole third act of FF7 is like, Holy is trapped in the planet because Aerith didn't finish casting it. It's like, if Aerith doesn't die, she casts Holy and we win.
So I'm actually no longer of the mind that there's 2 timelines, actually.
Okay.
I think.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, I actually think that theory no longer holds up, given, like, the new evidence that we have. I actually think what happened is more literal to what the game says happens. And that is that we changed fate. And so I actually think that as a result of us changing fate, we actually changed things both forward and backward in time. And I think that Zack's actually alive in this current timeline. I think that the symbolism of the terrier stamp changing the breed of dog that he is, I think the symbolism of that is that we have ripples throughout time, and events that were supposed to happen no longer have happened and are no longer guaranteed. The problem with telling a multiverse story, especially in the context of 7, is that there is really no way to facilitate that. For example, how do you have the threads with Cloud and Zack converge in any way when there is no way within 7 lore that I know of to traverse dimensions or to do any of that sort of, right? Exactly. Yeah, you'd have to Deus Ex Machina some kind of situation, ham fist away in there that they could even become aware of each other. So I
don't know what they're gonna do there either. No.
So. I don't think that that's the intent, though. I think that it's much easier to lead a story under the idea that it is one timeline that has been changed because they have altered fate, right? And then that also goes with that idea, because how is a multiverse spawning or something happening in a different universe thematically tied to the idea of changing fate? It's not.
I'll tell you what it actually is. It's the fan. I think it's the fan service dimension, or it's the ganked fan service dimension. They're going to make it look like this is hey, well, listen, we'll show you a universe where Aerith lives just for fun, while we'll kill her in the prime timeline, or then maybe that's what like the ending of Intergrade like suggests like that Aerith is missing or something, which
Yeah.
I don't want to theorize too much about what I think is going to happen in those vicinities, because they could do whatever, and I think I'm kind of on board as long as they don't mess up the characters. But we'll see what happens. But
and I think that's
I hear what you're saying too.
I think that's how most people feel, right? And I think I've resigned myself to understand that that's how most people feel. I'm more concerned about story than characters. I pretty much always am. For me, I care more about like what a story means than how much I like characters. But I understand that most people, for them, they really don't care how they feel about the story thematically or message-wise as much as I probably do. They're just like, I like Cloud.
I think, I would
He's
agree
nice.
with you under most circumstances. I would agree with you under most circumstances, but to me, like the core focus of FF7's story is its exploration of identity.
Right.
Like the most interesting story stuff in 7 has to do with like Cloud's identity, has to do with, Barrett's, guilt over what he let happen to his town and the way that he's taken that out on Shinra, has to do with Yuffie's tension with, this patriotism she has for a country that, didn't like she's too young to even remember, right? And like that kind of stuff. Like to me, the story of 7 is the characters. I would agree with you under most circumstances, but to me, I feel like everything about 7 that is resonant largely is in those people. That's the only but I understand what you mean completely. In most stories, I would agree with you 100%.
Right, and I still agree with you, and I still think though that it applies to this story. Because yes, the story of 7 is within its characters, but then what happens when you bring Zack back?
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows?
You see what I know. You see what I mean? Right?
That's also why they got to kill Aerith.
Right, and that
because nobody can fix Cloud except for Tifa.
Right, and so
she looks at him and goes, "I can fix him."
Right, and so
she can.
Right, and
normally, ladies, that's an unhealthy mindset, but she can fix Cloud. It's true.
Right, and so that's why I still agree with you, but I think that it still applies to this story, even with how character driven it is, because if you do make those changes, those character arcs fundamentally cannot play out the same way that they did. Not to the same effective. Right, exactly.
It can definitely be a problem. They can know let's be very clear. Yeah. I'm not in a position where I'm like, oh, there's no way they botch this future FF. Like they could totally botch it.
Right.
But one thing I will say is, again, I don't want to talk about 7 Remake for 10 hours because I could.
Yeah.
But I will say one thing on that I see people talk about a lot in terms of like the decision making with the ending and with all of this stuff is that like, man, they really blew their load with the Sephiroth fight at the ending of part 1, right? Like, I mean, he's going to be we're going to have to fight him again later. It's going to be pretty anticlimactic when we just fight him again at the ending of the story. You may have already thought about this, Ryan, because if there's anybody else who's like operating on this wavelength, it's you or somebody like you.
Yeah.
But I think I might blow some minds in chat right now. What if I told you that before Final Fantasy VII Remake, you have never played a canonical fight between Cloud and Sephiroth?
Yeah.
Because stick with me on this, right? At the ending, because in 7, canonically, in the Nibelheim incident, Cloud cuts Sephiroth, he is cleft in twain with the Buster Sword, basically, and falls in the life stream. And by the time period of 5 years later of the core story of 7, Sephiroth is like a torso in a bubble. And the only time the Masamune even shows up outside of flashback is stabbed into President Shinra's body, and I don't think anybody ever went back and picked it up. And every time you see Sephiroth in 7, until the very ending, you're not actually seeing Sephiroth. You're seeing a Sephiroth clone projecting his image via Genova cells or whatever, right? Because the lore of 7 was always airtight. Sephiroth the swordsman is gone because the Buster Sword went through him hot dog style, right? Or rather hamburger style, right? Like right through the middle. And by the end, when you fight him, you fight Bizarro Sephiroth and Safer Sephiroth. There is technically the very, very final fight in the live stream where it's Swordsman Sephiroth versus Swordsman Cloud, but you just hit Omni Slash and kill him. So it's like, you have fought Sephiroth as Zack in Crisis Core. You fought him as Sora in Kingdom Hearts, and you fought him as Cloud in Dissidia and Irgez God Bless the Ring. But there has never been a gameplay fight where you, Cloud, fight the swordsman Sephiroth until Remake Part 1.
Yeah.
And that's another area where I go, if we're doing this game anyway, if we're doing this multi-part game, I want to, like, we may as well make it this luxurious, expansive, big thing. And to me, I look at that and go, we're not going to fight. We don't fight Sephiroth at the end. We fight Safer Sephiroth, this big weird floating goon, right? You're never going to fight swordsman Sephiroth in this now action game that as actually like where you actually play out sword fights. I love that you fight Sephiroth at the ending of that, and that it kind of, especially because it kind of deletes Advent Children like forever. I don't even hate Advent Children, because like I'm actually one of the people who's like, it makes perfect sense for Cloud to be depressed after the adrenaline wears off after what happened to him in 7. But like I for one think that the fight at the ending of Advent Children is like the lamest thing ever. Like I think it's poorly directed and uninteresting and has no sense of weight or excitement to it. Like I think the motorcycle chase is way more exciting than the Sephiroth fight in that movie. And so having an actual weighty, meaty fight that you play against Sephiroth with cooler aesthetics, but essentially the same thing as what the ending of Advent Children is doing. It's like we've got all this. Everybody thinks, oh, yeah, God, they're really, that's really masturbatory. We're doing another fight against Sephiroth. It's always Cloud fighting Sephiroth. It's like, yeah, in like expanded, and he fights him in Kingdom Hearts for no reason. He fights him in Advent Children. He's shoved in all this stuff. We see them fighting in the FMVs for Dissidia, but like we've never actually done it. And now it's like done, right? If this is truly the Shut Up Forever 7 product, if they're like, we're done after Remake, it's over. We'll still sell merch because of course we will, but we're done with 7 after Remake. If that's the truth and that's their plan, then that's the Sephiroth fight. That's the Sephiroth fight that we didn't have before.
Right.
So that's one thing that I'm actually really on board with personally. That's something I've seen people complain about a lot. Like, oh man, it's gonna be totally anticlimactic when you fight him at the ending. And I'm like, you don't fight him at the ending. You don't remember what happens in 7.
Yeah, I think I'm not really worried about the spectacle. Like for me, that's like whatever. I think for me it was the presentation of Sephiroth. And not presenting like a very solid mystery with him, because I feel like there really isn't a mystery to Remake Sephiroth. And also there's not enough characterization to Sephiroth to make him interesting as like any other type of villain, because there's really only like 2 types of villains in my eyes. One's that I'm kind of stealing this from like Resident Arc, but because he kind of contextualized it for me, but it's kind of like there is either villains that basically command respect, right? Kind of command fear, and then there is the villains that sort of that are very empathetic, right? So like an Emmett Selk would be like an empathetic, like a villain that you can empathize with or kind of like see, right? But they're not like,
I'd kill that son of a gun so fast. Emmett is the worst dude in the planet. Yeah. Oh man, he's so sad. He's so sad about how he lost all of his people. So he carried out multiple genocides and is the biggest hypocrite in the world.
He's sad.
I put a cap in his ass. He'd be on site, Emmett. Don't come to my house. No, don't come at me with that. I know. I understand what you mean. He is sympathetic.
Moral relativism. Did he really kill people? Think about it.
Jesus.
People, right?
Oh no. I wish.
And then
when he says "remember us" at the end, like his whole thing is like they weren't really people, they weren't real. And then at the end, he's like, "Remember us, we were important." I wish there was a dialogue option to go, "Who said that?"
Remember the real people.
Yeah. I wish there was a dialogue option of like, "Who said that? What am I doing here?" Just to give him a middle finger on the way out the door.
Yeah. And then as opposed to that, you have the sort of villains that are, kind of entice fear or respect, and that's more of your Kefkas and your Sephiroths, right?
Yeah.
And the thing is that I really don't know what I feel about Sephiroth. I certainly can't empathize.
Sephiroth's not that good of a villain.
He's not. He was, I think, in the original because he was creepy as hell. and you really couldn't understand him. And the role that he played in Cloud Psychology was really cool and really interesting, and led to like a really great climax in his character arc. Without that, and with Sephiroth just having a bunch of appearances, he shows up without the characterization to really give him a sense of presence there, or for him to make sense there. And
Sephiroth is an extension, because really the villainy of 7 original is just like this deep, creeping evil that like something is just wrong with this place, right? And like part of it is, that's part of where it starts to diverge a little bit from the corporation as government evil of the beginning of the story, but like this sense that like that just there is this creeping influence of Jenova and Hojo as someone who just doesn't care about anything. Like just this sense that there is something wrong, just this splinter in the planet that is infecting this creeping, unknowable, distant evil that Sephiroth is vaguely mixed up in. He's a personification of just that there is this thing on the planet that is wrong. Like the reason that he can't integrate, at least this has always been my interpretation. The reason he and Jenova can't like integrate with the life stream, and the reason that we have this issue in Advent Children with the Geostigma or whatever, is like, it's like you have to conceptualize just how foreign Jenova is. That's like, because Genova's not from another planet, is from another planet, like it can't integrate with the life stream, right? Like it's not of the planet. It isn't of the energy of this planet. And now that those cells are in Sephiroth, he's not of this planet either. He is something that is fundamentally biologically detached from the rest of the systems of Gaia.
Right.
And that's like, he's an extension of that idea, but he as like a character, he's not a character.
Right. And that's why having him be mysterious works so well, because when he's a creepy alien guy that you can't really wrap your mind around, that's kind of like when he's at his best, I think, because that's when he becomes genuinely mysterious and unsettling, because like you can't understand him. He's weird alien guy, and you just don't. You can't. But when you try to,
there's too much Sephiroth in remake. I 100% agree with that.
Yeah. When you try to make him, and so I think they could make it work though in future parts, but I think that they're going to have to come up with like more characterization and structure like who Sephiroth is a little bit differently as a character in his arc. And I think that they've already hinted toward that, like what lies ahead does not yet exist, and all the other kind of stuff they set up with him at the end. So I think that they are going to try to maybe make a Sephiroth that as a character is more meaty and more fleshed out. But let's go ahead and take some of these.
I wasn't going to talk about 7 or you can't. 30 minutes is enough. If I go any longer, I'll go for all night.
Let's grab some of these questions. I'll start with this one right here. We'll get some worlds from Kingdom Hearts 4 that aren't just Disney, maybe from near Final Fantasy. No.
No. Hell no.
It's always gonna be Disney, man. Disney owns Kingdom Hearts.
I mean, literally, consider this, right? Consider that they are literally setting a game in Shibuya, and they're actively like, the world ends with you will not appear in this game. Yeah. Please consider that they are in statements saying it is not the same Shibuya. Neku and friends will not appear. Do not just say that. You're getting no Evil East visit. No, definitely no Nier visit. Are you nuts?
Yeah.
You think they're gonna go to? You think they're gonna go to freaking that place?
Yeah. Oh man.
What would Sora's reaction be?
Yeah.
How would Sora even? Sora's head would like cave in.
Oh my god.
Your world.
I literally just like imagine like 2B's ass like in front of Sora and just
I don't even mean that. I just mean like philosophically. Like A2 would kill him after one conversation.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
A2 would be like, I can't stand this effing guy. He would not make it.
Yeah, in like no capacity would Sora make sense for Nier. He just would not.
No, I would love an FF world, because personally I think it's wild that we haven't seen a Chocobo yet in Kingdom Hearts.
I think that is wild. Sora should ride a Chocobo.
Yeah, I think an Evil East visit would be cool. I think it'd be cool to go to Evil East. And honestly, there was that whole conversation where Yoshi P was like, somebody asked like, hey, so would a Kingdom Hearts raid series ever happen? And he was like, no way, because Disney. And now I'm thinking like, but they could but it wouldn't be as hard to put FF14 into Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, but Nomura seems to like only want to work with like his stuff though. He doesn't seem to like
I think the public opinion on 14 of like, oh, it's an MMO, so I don't play it. I feel like that's shifting.
Yeah,
I feel like that's shifting. I'm not saying this will happen. I'm saying me personally, I would like to see an Evil East visit or an FF14 visit in Kingdom Hearts. It will not happen, but I think it'd be neat if that happened.
No, you're right. Y'shtola should be in Kingdom Hearts. I completely agree. That's objectively correct.
Why did I know when I came on here to just not say anything about FF14?
You should have knew better. Question for Jacob. For the love of God, when are you going to become a writing consultant for Kingdom Hearts officially?
There's no job opportunity. Also, I don't speak Japanese, bro. I don't speak a word of that Nipponese. I'm not really qualified. I'm not really qualified for the job. I mean, I don't know. I'm very flattered that you guys think that. But,
start learning, man. You're wearing that Tim Rogers shirt right now. I can send you some of my apps, man. I've been studying. I know around 600 kanji now.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
I grind. I learn anywhere from like 3 to 8 new kanji a night.
No, that's really neat. That's
cool. So like when me and my girlfriend are like watching television, I have an app and I'll just write the same kanjis like over and over and over again on this app until they stick to my brain, and I go through and I have flashcards for all the words, and so I'm blazing through right now. I'm like really dedicated to this.
No, I mean that's awesome. I mean, that's like really good for you. I don't. I think the time for me to learn a new language is probably past, which is maybe defeatism. But
no,
I'm very flattered that who said that, who asked that question.
That was Billy the Kid Lawrence.
Very, very flattered. Thank you. No, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Hey, listen, if they ever do like a Disney Plus animated series for Kingdom Hearts, right? Like I will literally spiral into depression if I don't have a job working on that. But I think infiltrating the Japanese offices of Square Enix is well beyond my means at present time. And I wouldn't want to. Nomura, I like Nomura's work. I think that sometimes he needs a little bit of assistance because I don't think he's that fantastic of a writer. But I mean, I wouldn't like want to. I don't know. I think there's some people in my community who have occasionally imagined like, would you want to like write the next Kingdom Hearts or whatever? I'm like, I don't think so. No. If I was doing like maybe I could like to work on an adaptation. Yeah. If it was like I'd love to write like a season 1 like television adaptation of Kingdom Hearts 1 or something. But very flattered, but ain't gonna happen.
In a different world, if we had received a remake of any other Final Fantasy instead of 7, which one would you guys have wanted? You want to take this one first, or you want me to take it?
You go first. I got to think about it.
Final Fantasy VIII. Honestly, if I had to take like another game, I would have just taken like a brand new Final Fantasy instead of a remake. Sure. I'm not like, I know everyone else is like, I want remakes of this. I always prefer a new game to like literally any remake.
I mean, I talked earlier about my entire philosophy. You said you would take 8.
Yeah, but I would take 8 because 8 is a good game, but it has a lot of flaws, and I feel like unlike 7, where 7 kind of has like this sort of sacredness to it, I think you can change pretty much anything with 8.
Nobody's gonna give a crap if you change stuff about 8. Hardcore fans are like, yeah, do whatever you want.
Yeah, and like as long as Squall has the gunblade, it's gonna be like, yeah, let's go, bro.
Her dog at enemies, like you said, nobody cares.
Right.
Got it. Like I said earlier, like I was talking about my whole philosophy on remaking like 7 in the first place, and that feeling would extend to a lot of other work. Like, on one hand, like I'd kind of like, you say to yourself, oh, well, a remake of 6 could be neat. But then you're like, there's a level of abstraction going on between the content of those SNES and PS1 games and like what's literally being presented to you. This is part of why remaking 7 is so difficult and why it's multiple parts. I think about this, right? Like in 6, there's the bit where they're early on where they're on the raft and they're fighting Ultros and they get split up, right? And the game diverges into 3 different storylines. You remember, everybody knows this if they played 6.
Right.
And Sabin gets knocked off the raft, and he, like, his whole arc is like he winds up in Doma, right? He's working with Shadow and Cyan, and they wind up on the Phantom Trail. That river washes him like to another continent. He's in that river and just riding it for like hundreds of miles. And in the context of a Super Nintendo game, it's like there's he floated down a little river. See, there it is. When you in your brain you go, that's like he went like a whole continent without even trying to swim to the shore. What the hell happened? How did he tread water for what must have been days? Right,
and that no longer works, right? In a realistic
you'd have to like invent a whole new thing about like he hit his head and got knocked unconscious, but some fishermen pulled him out and he was on the boat for days unconscious. It was something like that. So I don't know. I guess maybe Tactics. I think remaking Tactics could be cool, and that's supposedly that's being rumored right now. It'd be cool to see Tactics. Does Vagrant Story count? I'd take a Vagrant Story remake.
I'm gonna say it counts.
I'm gonna say I want a Vagrant Story remake that like actually hits frame rate and has good controls, right? Like you can even keep the terrible combat system if you want. Like if you're just like that's what it is, that's fine. Just like fix the menus and make moving like feel like a real video game. And I'd take a Vagrant Story remake.
Oh man, I'm like dying laughing because my king Dream Boehm in chat, he's big Evil East chat, and he's like, holy based, great. I start laughing like immediately because I'm like, oh man, I know he's gonna love the response. This one comes from me. I am Tomas. Hey Jacob, what did you think the stuff with Nero and Vice and Remake Intergrade?
My brain totally blanked out, and I was like, Nero and Devil May Cry 5, how did we get there? Nero and Vice. I thought it was pretty good. I think that implementing Vice as a secret boss is really smart, because it's like there's not really a ton of characters like that. They're like an appropriate secret boss in the FF7 universe. I thought that was actually pretty clever. And I thought that using Vice in the capacity in the Yuffie story was actually pretty good. If nothing else, because it's like, maybe he never shows up again, right? Maybe he does. Maybe the deep ground stuff never shows up again, and he was just there for fun in the Yuffie DLC, and that's fine. But then I'm also like, this now gives Yuffie a final boss if we really want to. It's like avenge Sonon. Like she's got beef with that guy, right? Because most of the characters in 7 kind of have like even if it's flimsy, they kind of have like the rival character within Shinra in some way, right? Some of them are really flimsy, but like, Tifa and Scarlet do have that slap fight. Which, by the way, I guarantee you I know how that's going to play out. There's going to be a boss with her in a mech, right? That you play solo as Tifa on the canon, just like there is against Yuffie in the DLC. But it will end with the machine, like Tifa's exhausted, the mech is destroyed, but Scarlet will get out, and then it will devolve into the slap fight after you've had a big 3-phase boss fight with the big music. But like it would give Yuffie like kind of like that extra character to kind of fight. For example, when they like parachute back into Midgard to shut down the cannon or whatever, right? You can have him show up as a mid-boss maybe or something like that. I don't know. I thought it was pretty good. I thought the way they implemented it was good because it's like, it didn't really interfere with the story. They're just there to be kind of wacky, creepy dudes. I mean, Nero's pretty spooky in that DLC, and he makes for a good boss fight. So I think it works just fine. I thought it was well implemented. I thought it was a good idea. I thought that it made that DLC, a little bit more meatier than perhaps it would have been otherwise. Whether they use them again or not, I don't really care. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I feel the same way actually. I do think that he'll actually be utilized though. I think that he will actually be utilized. Nero, that is. But yeah. I in fact I think Sonon will actually be utilized in some way. I'm not actually 100% convinced that Sonon's like dead. Yeah, like he could get
brought back in like a kill me Yuffie please capacity, like during a boss fight later,
that's kind of what I'm thinking that's gonna happen there, and that'll tie in, because I don't think that they spent the money making Sonon to not utilize him and not utilize Nero as well.
We'll see. But I do think like having the Sviets in there, as long as they don't take on too much story importance, as long as they're just like grunts that Shinra sends out to stop these guys. I think that's fine. Because like a lot of the late game bosses in 7 original are big robots that don't work as well in the new format. Like all the best fights in Remake are against single targets. It's like the Rufus fight's awesome, the Sephiroth fight's awesome, you know, like the Reno fight and Rude fight are at least like kind of fun and interesting, stuff like that, right? So having like, you know, I can't see a fight against freaking what's that son of a gun's name? The head of the military, head of Shinra's military.
A Heidegger?
Heidegger, yeah. That guy. Like, I can't see a boss fight against Heidegger as a just dude standing there being super enthralling.
You know, it'd be great, man.
What would be great?
If, like, the slap fight with Tifa and Scarlet, it just goes, like, totally Metal Gear Rising.
They fall off the cannon and, like, still slapping each other.
Yeah. And like I'm talking about like JoJo, like Dragon Ball Z type slaps. Yeah, like it's like
each other, and the camera zooms out, and there's that big anime shockwave. It like splits the cannon in half, like in like the scene from Crisis Core.
Yeah,
fighting on the cannon. Yeah, that's good stuff. I like that.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
That'd be primo. I'd like that a lot.
Comment on how Neo Twiwi turned out, and how its failure to meet sales expectation will affect other low-budget Square Enix projects.
I didn't play Neo Twiwi. I made a video about Neo Twiwi like a week after it was announced, and I'm a Twiwi fan, and I haven't played Neo Twiwi, and I don't know when I will. I really don't have an opinion on its content. I haven't seen anybody really saying that much negative about it. Seems like mostly everybody was receptive. Did you play it?
Yeah, I actually didn't, and I'm a fan of Twiwi as well, but I didn't.
Oh no!
Yeah,
neither
so now,
of us.
Now we're gonna get canceled for not promoting Neo Twiwi,
sure.
and that's why it failed. No, they were just like a lot of games that were coming out at that time.
Yeah, it was a busy time.
And it just kind of, you know, went off my radar too. But also, I tried making videos on Neo, and I tried making videos in the original Twiwi and in stream content, and it just really seemed like nobody cared. If I'm completely blunt.
It's got a small, dedicated fan. I mean, I don't know if you ever watched the video that I did about Neo Twiwi when it was announced, but it's like they were trying to ramp a small niche product into mainstream success, and they had a strategy. Strategy just didn't quite work out. I think that I don't know. I think maybe they could have done. Obviously, they could have done some things differently leading up to it, but I don't know what exactly. It was always going to be a dice roll about whether or not it wound up reaching people or not, and the dice landed for it. Hopefully, they don't take that as an excuse to can the entire thing forever. Right now, they're making so much damn money. If they have the audacity to say we're going to continue supporting Babylon's Fall, then hopefully we'll get another Twiwi game sometime soon.
Yes. And that's basically how I feel too. Unfortunately, you know, as a content creator, I kind of have to go wherever my audience is wanting me to go, and I tried to push Twiwi and Neo, and I tried, and it just seems like my audience just didn't seem to care, so I couldn't just keep shoving the game down their throat. I mean, I do that with 14, and I don't give a fuck. But that's different. That's 14. Yeah, I try.
Y'all got to make exceptions in this life, man.
Yeah, I try to. I put out like a review of the original Twiwi even in order to like encourage people to play, and that was actually before Neo even got announced. So I don't know. I try with it, but the audience just didn't latch on the way I hoped. And I think that's kind of the same thing with Square. I know a lot of people say that like the marketing of Neo was what was botched. I don't know to what extent I agree with that, because it got a whole anime. So like a whole anime like re-encapsulating the first game, a demo. Yeah. It got trailers at pretty decent places. I did hear
great things about the anime. I pretty much only heard good things about the game. I did hear a couple people saying that anime wasn't that hot. So who knows?
So yeah, for me, it's sort of like I don't know what additionally could have been done unless they went full Guardians of the Galaxy with promoting it. But then Guardians of the Galaxy financially bombed, right? And Guardians of the Galaxy was everywhere.
It was also, by the way, really good.
Yeah, it was. And it's really unfortunate that it bombed. And we all know why it bombed is because the stigma like around Avengers, right?
Yeah.
And even though they marketed like the living hell,
I still think the audacity. Sorry, just because we've now mentioned Babylon's Fall and Avengers within like 2 minutes of each other, so I have to talk about this.
Yeah,
I think the audacity of a company like, cause here's the thing, right? The entire live service thing, games of service, gas, as they say. Everybody wants this. Everybody wants this to be a thing so they can make tons of money. And it's like, it hasn't, like Roblox and Fortnite and kind of Destiny for a little while, right? Like it's not working. The only, like, and the thing is, the most successful one right now, like pound for pound, is probably FF14. They already have the big money maker, and they're like, we can do more. Let's do it. We can do Avengers, we can do Babylon's Fall. And I'm like, oh my God, like you're printing so much money already, and you're wasting all this money on these bad products.
And see, here is what they forget though about FF14 compared to those games. When I buy FF14 or I buy an expansion, I am actually buying like the content, right? Like I'm going to get that content that I am paying for. If I buy Endwalker, I'm getting Endwalker, right? With a lot of these other games as a service endeavors, I'm buying a chance to win content in an already full-priced video game.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
but
so,
but the potential, potential for money. You have to do it.
Right. And so it would be differently if I was paying for a service and I paid the money and then I got the guaranteed thing that I want. But if I buy Avengers, I don't necessarily get all the content of Avengers. I have to pay exponentially more money than I paid for the base game to actually get all of the content in the game.
I mean, let's be clear, you do have to spend, there are things you can, and in some cases have to spend money on in 14, like after purchase to acquire. Like, aren't there like mounts and stuff that's like basically you have
completely cosmetic.
And that's what I mean. There is like there are cosmetic things you can spend money on in 14 afterwards, and a lot of the stuff you're rolling for in like Avengers or whatever is like new suits. That was all. No, I was just saying, like, for sake of fairness, you're still completely right. It was just like it was like, to be fair, there are technically microtransactions within 14. They're just not egregious, and it's like, it's like if you want to freaking have your Barbie dream house in 14, like that's where you're spending a ton of cash. Yeah. You know, if you're not doing that, then it's very manageable with just the purchase and the subscription.
And also to add on to that, most of the best glam items, which are in the game as content, and most of the stuff that they are charging for is like, if you want to cosplay as a Scion in the game, if you want like Lisa's or like Y'shtola's clothes, you could buy.
So there aren't 200 Y'shtolas running around.
Right, because and that's actually probably for the best, right? And so
I will say, that being said, my absolute favorite characters in 14 are the Alphino and Alize cosplayers.
Yeah.
you get like the Hrothgar that's wide Alphino.
Oh,
you get Nyalphino and Nyalize. I love that meme. So many all of those I love. I would never roll that as my character, but it's the funniest thing.
Right. And so you can totally play 14, not spend a single dollar. A lot of times too, and like what's actually great about that cash shop too is that it's not something that Yoshida wanted to do, but the agreement that he made with Square basically was one, the money from that cash shop has to go directly back to being invested in the game. So when you buy something from that cash shop, it's always like all the money that they make from the cash shop has to be reinvested back into the game. And then like I think like the second condition is that like Square Corporate couldn't really touch anything else, and that was the condition. Yeah,
I know that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
stay out.
Yeah, and so he basically said, "I'm gonna do this.
Do it. I'll do it, but you're not allowed to touch it."
Yeah, but you basically have to f on like any other thing. Yeah, and so even adding Heaven's Word to the trial was something that he had to fight corporate on. Because they, like Square Enix higher ups didn't believe, like, why are we giving more free content?
Yeah,
right? And he was like, A Realm Reborn, you know, it's kind of rough. I think people like really need to experience Heaven's Word before they would actually be like sufficiently like hooked into the game. And so he basically had to to go to war, so to speak. Not literally, obviously, but he had to fight for it and have like a long debate with his higher ups in order for him to do that. So that's what's based about Yoshi P, is that he when he has an idea and he knows like what's best, he thinks for his customer,
yes
yeah,
very red pill.
Yeah. Yeah, he's very based about that stuff. What are your thoughts about Dragon Quest and Kingdom Hearts, as well as other Square Enix projects?
Honestly, I think Dragon Quest would be super fun in Kingdom Hearts. I think it fits like perfectly.
Yeah.
It will similarly never happen, despite how awesome it would be.
Yeah. Yeah, Nomina's like he's really into his stuff for Kingdom Hearts. I don't even think
it's about him. I think it's just so much like red tape.
Oh,
like,
that's it too.
Even within the company, that would be like, how much time would that add to the development of going back and forth between what you guys are and aren't allowed to do? But I think even just a world that's not based on one of the individual games, but it just like has the aesthetics and the monsters of Dragon Quest, and it's like an original adventure where Sora runs into some dude who doesn't talk very much, and they go and they defeat an evil dragon or an evil king or something, and they fight cucumbers and stumps. It'd be great. It'd be awesome, but it won't happen.
Yeah, I think so too. But yeah, he would have to get probably permission from like Yuji Horii and other people. And yeah, there's actually a surprising amount of red tape just within, just like doing things like internally in the company for these crossover projects, which is why something like even like Star Wars happening in Kingdom Hearts is not even like, oh, we own it, so just throw it in there. They still have to go through a lot of
different people involved in those processes.
Yeah, and you know what? Not even like the creatives really know exactly what they can use. Really, only the legal teams in those respective companies know exactly what can be used, and you're gonna have to go through them first, and they have to sort through everything and have everyone sign onto everything in order for anything to be used. And there's a whole process of reviewing all the content. It's a nightmare, basically.
That's my nightmare about, I was talking earlier about like doing, you know, if they ever did a KH TV show, it's like, I'd be afraid if they ever did that just like the Final Fantasy characters wouldn't be in it. Because
they probably wouldn't,
like somebody at some level would say, we don't have time to get every script translated into Japanese and approved before we go into production on episodes. Like you would need someone to be able to go in and like go to Tetsuya Nomura and other people at Square and be like, listen, this is what we're planning on doing with the Final Fantasy characters for the entire season. We promise we'll treat them with the utmost respect. These are all of our extremely specific plans. And like, then they'd have to approve them, but also say, we're not going to be too super hands-on, right? Like, even if it was a streaming show, like the pace at which television production happens, you can't be stopping every time a script is finished to translate it into Japanese, to send it off to another company and go through 6 layers of lawyers and boardroom meetings to get approval for whether or not, you know, Squall was perfectly in character in scene 3.
Yeah.
You know, like,
it's tough.
That would be a big worry if they ever did an adaptation of KH. It's like, I'm afraid they would just cut the FF characters, and I think that's a huge mistake. I think you would just have to like, you'd have to find people who were willing to work with you on it and power through it to make the show good. But yeah, I don't know if that'd happen.
Let's get like 2 or 3 more questions in, you guys. So, no Kairi game?
No Kairi game.
No Kairi game.
No Kairi game. In fact, I'm gonna go a step further. No Kairi.
No Kairi? I think she's done. Yeah. Except for when she shows up to be Stella and fight Sora and Quadratum.
To be Stella and fight Sora.
Yeah.
I thought that, because I knew they would announce a mobile phone game at the 20th anniversary event. I thought they might make it a Kairi training guide-in, right? Where it's like while Riku is off doing Quadratum stuff, it's like, here's Kairi doing unimportant side, because also you can do your easy, like, each patch is like she goes to a new Disney World and Roxas shows up, then Xion shows up, and all the other characters who have been written out of the story can show up for fan service because they can't participate in the real thing. I thought that was a reasonable guess, but I forgot that, you know, we had Scala Ad Kylum's story to tell still, and whatnot. So,
which by the way, I think Dream Drop Distance should have just been the Kyrie game.
Oh, Dream Drop Distance absolutely should have been the Kyrie game, but these are the consequences of not planning out where you're going to go ahead of time and realizing that you should probably, if you're, it doesn't. We don't need to get in a whole conversation about that. Nah, no Kyrie game ever. Not going to happen. Don't get your hopes up. Listen. When is it going to be time for the Kyrie game? We have to make a Yozora game separate from the Sora game, dude. I'm not going to get a Kyrie game. Are you nuts?
When is Kyrie going to get like substantial screen time of substance? In the
TV show that I'm gonna write.
Yeah. I'm like, let's do Kyrie right in the games where she's not actually playable first, and then we can talk about a Kyrie game.
Yeah, let's be real. We got the Kyrie game. It was called Melody of Memory, and when we got to the Kyrie scenes, what happened? She got her ass kicked by a dead villain, and then had to be saved by being possessed by her man. Yeah, let's not be asking for a Kyrie game then when this is the baseline we're operating.
Yeah. Oh, I hated that so much. I hated that so much. I wish they would do right by her character, and I just don't think that they have any intentions of doing right by her character anytime soon.
I don't think Nomura's. I think Nomura wrote that character for a very specific purpose in Kingdom Hearts 1, and he wanted to write her there. And now he's writing other stories, and he doesn't have a purpose for it. He's got too many. Here's the thing. Listen, I don't dislike any of the major Kingdom Hearts characters. Like, I'm not a huge fan of Terra, Aqua, and Ven, but I hold no ill will towards them. They're totally fine characters, right?
Yeah.
Half that cast needs to just be gone.
Yeah.
There's way too many characters, and it's not just Kyrie that's getting treated poorly. None of them have anything to do. But that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah. There's too many characters and not enough screen time for all of them. Question: is Nomura going to go super meta and put himself in Walt Disney into the realm of fiction? Wait, what? Is Nomura gonna go super meta and put himself or Walt Disney? Oh, you mean like actually have Walt Disney show up? I don't think Disney would let him do that.
It never would have happened. I like well before Union Cross happened. Just like there's a tickle in my brain once that was like, it could be neat if we ever went back to the Keyblade War times and like Walt Disney was a Keyblade master, like Walt Disney and Oswald were like Keyblade masters. That never happened in a million years. I was like, no Walt Disney. Here's the thing. I don't think Nomura is like, and I don't say this to disparage Kojima. I think Kojima thinks it's really funny to put himself in video games.
Yeah.
Like when Kojima shows up in Ground Zeroes, it's like, Snick, what took you so long? Bah, 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 bah. I think he thinks that's the funniest thing in the world. I don't think it's even an ego thing.
Yeah.
But I think that Nomura strikes me as a fairly introverted dude. I don't think he particularly wants to put himself into his own work in that capacity. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I was thinking the other day how I followed Nomura's work almost my entire life, and I followed Yoko Taro for maybe like 4 years, and I don't even really know what his face looks like, because if you Google his face, like Hideki Kamiya comes up and not him for some reason. And yeah, so I don't even know what Yoko Taro's face even looks like. But I actually feel like I know more about Yoko Taro as a human being than I know about Nomura. I really don't know anything about him. Yeah,
he's a very private person, which I respect. I respect the hell out of that. But yeah, for that exact reason, he's not going to be. I don't think he's the type to do like a literal self-insert. I don't think that's in his character.
Yeah,
but I don't know him. So
yeah. I guess that kind of goes back to the point, is that like if he was the kind of guy to do something like that, I think we'd know more about him. Right. Let's get maybe 2 more questions.
Did you write, because now it's been a while since you asked for questions, unfortunately. Did you write down some of the ones from earlier, or can you within Twitch, can you like go back to old ones, or
yeah
how does that work?
I just scroll the chat. Actually, I think this one's like a good one right here. Actually, I think we got 2 good ones. Okay. Do you think FF9 remake is real?
Yeah.
Yeah.
everything else on that list has been real so far.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what it means. I don't know if it's like an act, like if it's a 7 style, like it's a new thing, or if it's like a midpoint where it's like still like fixed camera, but maybe it's like full 3D backgrounds and it's all voice acted. Like if it was like essentially 9, but with some new bells and whistles, and the combat's kind of improved a bit maybe, and like there's voice acting, like that I could see that. But I mean, also 9, unlike 7, like 9 is a much more, some people are going to think I'm nuts, but I know what I'm talking about. It's a much more contained experience. Like, I think you could do 9 to modern fidelity standards in one game. Because also, like, I think about it this way, like, if to depict Midgar at that level is like, of course you need to spend 40 hours there. Whereas, like, I don't need to spend 2 hours in Lindblom. You know, nobody has that strong of a feeling about Alexandria or Lindblom, and Alexandria is like 2 streets, and the castle. So I think that it would be plausible to do a 7 style full redo in like 1 or 2 games, maybe even just 1. But I don't know if they'll go that far. But I do think it is real. What do you think that looks like? You've probably thought about it more than I have, honestly. What do you think a 9 remake looks like?
I think that a 9 remake looks pretty similar to what you described there. I don't think it's going to be another Final Fantasy VII remake, and this is no disrespect to Final Fantasy VII remake, but thank God, because for us to have 2 Final Fantasy remakes that be spanning like a decade worth of time to create and release, it's too much. I'd rather like original new Final Fantasy games would basically be dying in terms of like resources and time, so that we could recreate the past, and for what, right? Like,
totally agree.
Like, people talk about like, oh, well, if you don't like remakes, maybe you're too attached to your nostalgia. I'll take that a step further. Maybe if remakes are your #1 most desired games, you're too attached to nostalgia. if you want remakes in general, that's a nostalgic urge. I just like new video games, new Final Fantasies. I
agree with that.
Yeah, I want new FFs that are as good as 9. How about that? Right? To me, that's cooler. Because I already have 9, right? I do. So
100%. Especially because they're all accessible. Like, I mean, if we lived in a George Lucas world where like you're not allowed to play those games anymore, but like as much as we bitch and complain about retro game accessibility and like, oh, that Chrono Cross remaster that just came out was kind of bare bones and not that great, like, I mean, at least I could buy it. At least I can buy 9. At least I can buy 7. And like they are all, and even before like the Pixel remasters, like the iOS versions were kind of crummy, but before those happened, like those games were accessible. All these games you've never really been unable to purchase these games. You know what I mean? So there is that. Like if we were in a situation where 7 remake was the only thing we had access to, again, that goes back to my whole point about the philosophically, like, 10 years later, it would still be the 90s version that mattered.
Right.
But the, honestly, this is not to talk about 7 Remake too much, but a big debate around that game was like, this is going to ruin the game for new fans, right? And I'm like, a lot of people had issues with like specific decision making, and like you talked about the music during the plate collapse sequence and the tone leading up to that. Like some people were like, oh man, that whole train graveyard sequence is so long, and I know the plate's going to collapse, right? Well, other people don't know that. And I think it's perfectly plausible for a new player to think, oh, that won't happen.
Yeah.
There's no way that the good guys will stop them.
Yeah.
And like I think at this point, with as accessible as FF7 is, right? If you haven't played it yet, you are either born after 2005 or you're not gonna.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So for example, I think about specifically Angry Joe, the YouTuber, right? Who I like Angry Joe's stuff quite a bit, actually. I don't always agree with him, but I think he's a pretty good critic. I think he puts on a good show. And he was like, he played 13. That was his first Final Fantasy, and he was like, "This sucks. I don't like this." And he wasn't like the whole. He's a guy that is not going to be like, "Yes, see, I knew it. Japanese games suck. Final Fantasy sucks." He was like, "Man, I'm an Xbox guy. I wanted to have the fun that you guys have, and this wasn't good." He was really excited for 15, right? Like he was legitimately excited for 15 because he probably watched like stuff that people like I or you made talking about Versus, and he was like, oh my god, this sounds awesome. Then it was the game that it was, and he didn't even finish it. He did an impressions video where he was like, it was pretty good, yeah, I enjoyed it, but he didn't even get to the Venice. I don't remember what the name of this is.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like, he had a good time with it, but he didn't even finish it. And he was like, he was legitimately excited for it, right? He played 7 Remake, and in his review, he's like, this was badass. I loved it. I think he gave it like a 9 out of 10. He put it on his, he gives games sometimes a badass seal of approval, which is like on his list, like best games I've reviewed on the show list. And in the review, he's like, I immediately bought the game on my Nintendo Switch because I couldn't wait to see what happened next. It's like, he could have bought that game at any point in the last like 6 years before he played it, but he didn't. I think that a lot of the complaints that hardcore fans have had about 7, where we're like, oh no, no new players, it's gonna ruin the legacy. I think that a lot of the issues that stick out to us is like, that's different. So the new player is just part of the experience, and they finish, here's my thought process. If someone hates Final Fantasy VII Remake who's never played 7, they probably weren't gonna like 7.
Right. Oh yeah, I agree.
And I think that if anybody out there hasn't played 7 yet, but they go, I'll play the remake, they're the type of person who's like, they're the same type of person who goes, I won't watch black and white movies, which is number one.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
number one, zero IQ move. But number 2, I'm joking. But number 2, like it's too like we're not going to get them to play the PS1 version. But a ton of people, I've seen a ton of people on the internet, and a couple people in real life I know who were like, you know, I watched the first season of the anime and I couldn't wait for more, so now I'm reading the manga. Right? A ton of people went back and played 7 because of Remake Part 1. Like one of Angry Joe's spoiler casts afterwards, because I was curious to see how he responded. He was swinging like endgame FF7 lingo, talking about the lore of 7. I was like, oh, he's beaten it. Like he finished the game and he knows what's going on. It's like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's my feeling on that, but that loops back around to the remake discussions in general. Of like, I'm so much more open to something like 7 Remake in a world where I can buy 7.
Right.
And same thing with 9. But then yeah, like you said, in that same vein, because they're so accessible, I kind of want something new. So let's let 9 be one game, not 17 games.
Right. And I'd rather have, you know, Final Fantasy 18, 19, 20, instead of just having like, I'm gonna just go back to my childhood again and again and again and again. And I think that, to me, for Square Enix, would almost signal like it's sort of like being creatively bankrupt in a way. Like
that happens. Right. Oh no, it's over. It's over. This party's over. I'm trying to become a Dragon Quest fan.
Oh hey, Susie, the Spear Hunter joined us. Hello.
Oh, hey. Very cool.
Yeah, I would rather have new FFs in general. The way you talked about, like, you know, like new stories happening in Remake and stuff like that, and wanting new stories. I guess to me, the way I kind of like perceive it, like when it comes to Remake and the differences in the story, for me, I think that if I want something that is new, then I just want a new game and not a remake. To me, if the point of a remake is not in some way to like both preserve and enhance history, in a sense, and that's not to say that they can't do extremely different things with the remake, by the way, because I actually think that in many cases, like with Wutai, it's fine. But for me, if we are to diverge into like an entirely different story, which we might do, I know what Kitase said, but they also end that game with the unknown. You
also don't believe him.
I don't believe him, because you wouldn't put the unknown journey will continue if it's the known journey that's going to continue.
I think it's all a big head fake.
Yeah, I think that that things will be fundamentally different. And by the way, I actually don't think that's a bad thing whatsoever, because I actually think that now that if it really is a sequel, like if we're really looking at this as a sequel, then I don't want the remake part anymore, because that's now the inherently boring part. I already know what happens. Get to the new story. That's actually interesting.
I've already talked about 7 Remake for 30 minutes, so I'm not going to talk about it, but I will say, like, I feel similarly enough in that, like, again, I thought remaking 7 was a pointless exercise until I found out they were doing weird stuff. I only got interested when the trailer's like, oh, something different is going on. And when those copies leaked in Australia, and I started hearing about the ghosts and how the game ended, I was like, yes!
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so on board. And everybody else was like, oh no, they're ruining it. I was like, yeah, I'm in. I'm so in.
Yeah. But to me, like, that's like, then like, why are we that deep in the remakes? We're not excited for the remake part. We're excited for new stories.
I don't know. I'm still excited for
that.
My feelings on that are complicated.
Right, yeah. I understand, but like I guess my point is just ultimately like it seems to me that something that's actually new is the thing that excites us. So I think that like Final Fantasy fans are like very like focused on like let's remake this, let's remake that, right? But I'm kind of like, you know, the excitement being generated with remake, it seems to me, from remake fans is the idea that it won't be the same thing, it'll be something new. And I think what's even more exciting than doing something new with an old thing is just doing something completely fucking new. Like that's why 16 ranks more exciting to me than Final Fantasy VII Remake, because even if Final Fantasy VII Remake does like a ton of new stuff, I'm like, this is still Cloud and Aerith and Tifa, and I'd rather just have like the legitimately new Final Fantasy personally.
I'm sure you had a couple of other questions lined up before we wrap up, but one question popped up that I can answer in one sentence. Go ahead and do it. Skylane said, if you could write 17, I assume FF17, what would it be? I would hire Yasumi Matsuno.
Based. Yoshi P would say the same thing.
That's my answer.
Yoshi P would also say that exact same answer, because Yoshi P Dreamboom is about to like pop off in chat because he's like, yo, I love this game. Evilly spilled, man. Yoshi P would agree.
I assume if I'm lucky enough to be in a position to write Final Fantasy 17, then hopefully in this magical hypothetical alternate timeline where I'm doing this, then I'll probably be allowed to take a shot at another one afterwards. So I'm hiring him. I'm hiring him first. I'll do mine later.
Yeah.
I did have one idea once for a Final Fantasy game. One time, it wouldn't be like 17. But I had an idea one time for like a spin-off, and it would be like a game where you play as a summoner, but it's like mostly a kaiju game.
Really?
I think it'd be neat, because I'm like the difficulty of doing summons is like in the old days, in 16-bit days, summons were like, you know, a little sprite appears and it shoots a spell and then it goes away, right? As soon as we get to the new era, like, they're these it's so hard to incorporate them into the story, you know? It's become very weird to incorporate summons into the narrative, because it's like, if you can just summon a big monster anytime, how does that work?
Right.
I feel like you do a story that's like the evil nation has all Magitech armor, and they're pushing into a country that doesn't have any armor, right? That doesn't have any actual armored vehicles, and you're playing as like a summoner who's a refugee from a summoner tribe that got mostly wiped out, and you get recruited by this country's military, and it's mostly like the only bits on foot are like in a little hub area, right? And it's like level based, and you go and do big fights as a kaiju blowing up Magitech armor, and like as the game goes on, eventually you're fighting really, or like diamond weapon style stuff, right? That's the only idea I've ever had for or at least one that I can pitch in 2 seconds. I think that wouldn't be a Final Fantasy 17, that'd be like a spin-off.
Right.
But I think that can... Anyway, sorry.
Right, no, that's actually a really great response. Gosh, if I were to write Final Fantasy 17, oh my god, this is gonna be like an awful take. Like, everyone's gonna ratio me on this.
Okay, I want to get this
so
now.
hard. I don't even want to say it. I would want something like, don't get me wrong, not necessarily, but also yes. I kind of want something aesthetically and thematically like Stormblood.
Sure. No, absolutely. No, I'm not. Nah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get ratioed right alongside you. I'm on board for that.
Yeah, I thought Stormblood's aesthetic was so cool. Like,
Absolutely.
Basically doing like Final Fantasy, like feudal Japan, and like Mongolia, and like Final Fantasy China.
Yeah, I'm on board.
That was that was oh man, aesthetically that was just so awesome, right? And a lot of things in like the lore details. Stormblood did have like Stormblood's like an 8 out of 10 story, I think. In the middle of like
a 10 out of 10 story.
Yeah, 3 other 10 out of 10 storylines.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I was bored for like an hour there, and there were a couple of characters I didn't like. What a
it's such a like really interesting story in like a number of ways, and like the topics that it deals with, and a lot of the characters and stuff would just be awesome. And I think the last time we had like Asian fantasy and like Final Fantasy was 10, right? Other than Stormblood, and 10's aesthetic is probably my favorite in like the whole series. I just think that 10's aesthetic goes hard as fuck, bro. 10's aesthetic is just I would absolutely go for do 10 again, but not on the waterfront Stormbloody. Absolutely, for sure. No, that'd be great. I'm
all on board for that.
That, or something like Agni's Philosophy, where it even incorporates like Middle Eastern aesthetics and themes into it, would also be really cool. I would just like for Final Fantasy to go in like a direction like that, because I feel like that's fresh without necessarily pushing the same modern aesthetics or just pushing like typical high fantasy stuff, because I feel like that would be like the coolest stuff. And hopefully 16 will also have like, because you know we do have like 6 nations, so
we don't know what any of them look like yet, really.
I want them to have like very different cultures and draw from very different places. Like in Endwalker, we got like Thavnair, which is like basically Final Fantasy India, which is really cool, right? And then, you know, we also have like, because I mean, Eorzea in general is like Final Fantasy Europe, more or less. And so now
traditional fantasy,
right? Traditional, And so now I'm kind of looking like, I'm like, man, I wonder what they're going to do for the next expansion. So I'm like wondering if they're going to use like maybe Eastern Europe or Africa. They got like a lot of interesting places they could still go, like South America. There's a lot of different countries, continents that they could go to with that. And so I just really love to see Final Fantasy like use different cultures and stuff. They did that really well with like 10 and Stormblood. And so I kind of want to see them do more of that. I think that
I'm not going to ratio for you. If they're going to ratio you for that, they're going to have to ratio me too.
People will get like really angry by Stormblood. It's really weird because it's mostly it's obviously it's 14 fans, but like Stormblood's like it's a really solid 8 out of 10 story, but because it's like right in the middle of those 10 out of 10 stories that are like really well done, like a lot of FF fans like will get kind of like riled up about it. But I'm just like, dude, it's like it's better than like half of the mainline stories, if I'm being completely honest. Like you ain't gonna sit here and convince. I love FF8, don't get me wrong when I say this, but you can't convince me that FF8 story was probably better written than Stormblood's, because I wouldn't agree with that.
Nah, if they're gonna if they ratio one of us, they gotta ratio both of us.
All right, I think that is where we're gonna wrap up.
Sure. Since that went on an hour longer.
Yeah, I know.
I don't mind.
These
come on your time, dude.
These tend to go long. I know my girlfriend. She's probably waiting on me. Any final statements, final comments you want to make before we wrap this out? Do you want?
Because we've talked too much anyway.
Yeah.
I figure the odds of us. I mean, we were talking previously about like, you know, hey man, if 16 trailer drops earlier than I expect, I'll come on when it happens. So I figure there's at least a decent chance. It seems like people had a good time. Maybe you're having an awful time over there, and you're just hiding it behind that winning smile.
No,
I had a great time. I'd be happy to come on again another time. So I don't see it a reason for me to somehow derail this with a closing statement that goes on for 20 minutes, because that's usually how I manage things. It was wonderful. It was wonderful to come on and talk to you about Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, no, dude, it was awesome. I love to have you back on. My viewers have been looking forward to this, and I think they loved it. We had some pretty strong numbers for this. This will probably make it to YouTube. More than likely will. Do you have anything you want to plug? Channel?
Crap.
Anything?
Hey, if you're watching this, you probably already like Final Fantasy XIV. But if you're like, I don't know, watch the play frame ongoing playthrough of A Realm Reborn. It's because it's the most condensed one I've seen. It's like it still shows optional fun stuff, but it's like it's MSQ with a lot of editing, a lot of the downtime of running around cut out. Because most playthroughs of 14 are like streamed, you know. So because it's such a long game. So if you want to watch, if there's anybody in here who wants to watch 14, but it's like, I don't know, that's a good place to start. I mean, my own channels, obviously. We're currently doing a playthrough of Uncharted 3. It was filmed like a year ago at this point. It's releasing very slowly. But yeah, we're going through the Uncharted series right now. And we recently started streaming Breath of the Wild. That's going to be slow going, but we started streaming Breath of the Wild. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's worth really plugging. Yeah, I don't know. I talked about Tim Rogers a lot in this, but I don't think he needs a plug from me. Nah. I would say, swing by sometime. We have a good time on our channels, though we've released videos very, very sporadically because I have a full-time job and other stuff going on, so it's just slow going on my end. But yeah, Frustrated Jacob and Research Runs, we do cool stuff. Come check them out.
I gotta get Tim back on here. I want to get Susie on here. She's so busy too. So I gotta get more people on here.
Tim's on. I think Tim's still on his vacation. I think he's still on his Action Button Season 1 vacation.
Yeah, I see.
He was.
Okay. Oh, we just got a commit from Susie here. She says she'll be on. Let's go. I've been waiting for this moment. Yeah. And then I wanted to have Tim and Resident Arc both return. But I'm kind of waiting for something like really substantial to happen with 16, sure. so that we can really have like the meaty discussion, you know, or even 7R2. But I'm pretty sure 16 is gonna be the next thing.
Yeah.
If that spring update goes through.
We're definitely gonna see like the next time we see 7 Remake Part 2, it's gonna be a JPEG. It's not literally going to be a JPEG, but it's gonna be like a shot of the character standing on a hill, accompanying, you know, and brief footage of Cloud running through the field, demonstrating, oh wow, this is the new gameplay style.
Yeah.
If they do that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's even gonna be open world, but I'm saying it'll be something like that.
Yeah.
It'll be like 20 seconds long. It'll say releasing year. We'll see it later this year, but we're definitely gonna see 16 first.
Yeah, they'll show like Cloud like walking out, and then they'll show like a big field stretching out, and then it'll be like 7 Remake 2.
I call those JPEG trailers. They're not actually JPEGs, but they're JPEGs.
Yeah, 100%. What about HMK or Gamers Joint? Yeah, HMK. Me and him have already been talking about something.
Oh,
so
cool.
That'll probably be a thing. All right, you guys. I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. Later.
Thanks for having me on.